Ethan Hayes stood frozen in the conference room doorway, his pulse hammering against his ribs. Victoria Hale, his CEO, his boss, the woman whose face he'd spent 8 months deliberately avoiding, had just asked him a direct question. Not about deadlines, not about budgets, but about him, about why he couldn't meet her eyes, about why he fled every room she entered. His throat tightened as the truth clawed its way up, the truth he'd buried under project reports and late nights and single-father exhaustion. Because the answer was impossible. Because looking at Victoria Hale felt like staring at a ghost. If you want to know how a 30-year-old widower survived working for a woman who looked exactly like his dead wife, and what happened when she finally demanded the truth, stay with me until the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The architecture firm of Brennan and Hale occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in uptown Charlotte, North Carolina, where the skyline glittered against the Blue Ridge foothills, and ambition moved as fast as the morning traffic on Tryon Street. Ethan Hayes had worked there for 6 years, long enough to know which conference rooms had the best light, which clients tipped at Christmas, and exactly how many seconds it took to walk from his desk to the stairwell if he needed to disappear. He had become very good at disappearing. It was a Thursday morning in early September when everything unraveled. Ethan sat at his desk on the 2nd floor, surrounded by blueprints for a mixed-use development in South Park. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. His daughter Mia's latest crayon drawing, a lopsided house with a purple sun, was taped to the edge of his monitor. He was 30 years old, a senior project manager, a single father, and a man who had spent the last 8 months perfecting the art of strategic invisibility. The elevator chimed. Ethan didn't look up. He knew that sound. He knew the rhythm of her heels on the polished concrete floor, confident, measured, deliberate. He knew the faint scent of her perfume, something clean and understated that never announced itself but lingered just long enough to notice. He knew all of it because he had trained himself to recognize the warning signs. Victoria Hale was on the floor. He kept his eyes locked on his screen, even as his peripheral vision tracked her movement past the open cubicles, past the break room, past the junior architects hunched over their drafting tables. She moved through the office like weather, inevitable, undeniable, impossible to ignore. People straightened when she passed. Conversations paused. She didn't demand attention. She simply commanded it. Ethan forced himself to breathe. She was 25 years old. She had inherited controlling interest in the firm after her father's sudden retirement 8 months earlier, stepping into the role of CEO with a composure that unnerved everyone who underestimated her. She was brilliant. Everyone agreed on that. She had a degree from Cornell, a portfolio that included work in Dubai and Singapore, and a reputation for seeing 3 moves ahead in every negotiation. She was also devastatingly beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or effort. It was structural. Genetic, the kind of beauty that belonged in old paintings or quiet tragedies. But Ethan never looked at her long enough to admire it, because looking at Victoria Hale hurt. The footsteps stopped. Ethan's fingers froze over his keyboard. "Mr. Hayes." Her voice was calm, professional, edged with something he couldn't quite name. He didn't look up. "Miss Hale, do you have a moment?" "I'm in the middle of the South Park revisions. Deadline's tomorrow. This won't take long." He could feel her standing there, waiting. The air between them felt thick, pressurized. He clicked his mouse twice for no reason, pretending to focus on a detail that didn't need his attention. "I'd prefer to stay on schedule," he said quietly. "And I'd prefer," Victoria said, her tone sharpening just enough to cut through his deflection, "to speak with you in my office. Now." Ethan's jaw tightened. Around them, the office had gone still. People weren't staring. They were too professional for that. But they were listening, waiting. He closed his laptop. "Of course." Victoria's office occupied the corner of the 3rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city like a postcard. Ethan had been inside exactly 3 times since she'd taken over, once for his performance review, once for a budget meeting, and once to deliver a contract she'd requested. Each visit had lasted less than 10 minutes. He had perfected the technique of looking at the space just past her shoulder, at the skyline, at the silver pen on her desk, at anything except her face. She closed the door behind them. The click of the latch felt final. Sit. Ethan remained standing. I really do need to finish geek. Sit down, Ethan. The use of his first name landed differently than it should have. She rarely used first names. She was formal, precise, careful with boundaries. Hearing his name in her voice felt like a door opening that he didn't want to walk through. He sat. Victoria moved to the window, her back to him. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched, taut and uncomfortable. Ethan focused on his hands, on the faint ink stain on his thumb from the pen Mia had stolen yesterday, on the worn edge of his wedding band that he still wore even though Lily had been gone for 18 months. You've been avoiding me, Victoria said finally. Ethan's throat tightened. No. You leave meetings early. You take the stairs when you see me near the elevator. You won't make eye contact. You requested to be reassigned from the Piedmont project the moment I became lead. That was a scheduling conflict. It wasn't. He said nothing. Victoria turned to face him, and for the first time in 8 months, Ethan had no choice but to look at her fully. The light from the window caught in her dark hair. Her gray eyes were steady, unreadable. There was a faint scar near her left eyebrow, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. She tilted her head slightly when she studied him, the same unconscious gesture that Lily used to make when she was trying to understand something. The resemblance was staggering. Ethan's chest constricted. I don't know what I did, Victoria said quietly, but whatever it is, I need you to tell me, because I can't run this company if my senior project manager is treating me like a threat. You're not a threat. Then what am I? The question hung in the air between them, sharp and impossible. Ethan looked down at his hands. His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. You look like someone I loved. The words landed like stones. Victoria didn't move, didn't speak. The silence that followed was different now, heavier, more fragile. Someone you loved, she repeated carefully. Past tense. Yes. And this person, my wife. Ethan's voice cracked on the word. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to continue. Lily. She died 18 months ago. Aneurysm. She was making coffee on a Sunday morning, and she just... He stopped, the memory slamming into him with the same brutal force it always did. She was 28. Victoria's expression shifted, something unguarded flickering across her face before she pulled it back under control. I'm sorry, she said softly. Everyone's sorry. Ethan stood abruptly, needing to move, needing to escape the weight of her gaze. Look, I know it's unprofessional. I know it's not your fault. But every time I see you, I see her. Same eyes, same hair, same... He gestured helplessly. Everything. So yes, I avoid you. Because looking at you feels like drowning. He expected her to respond with the usual platitudes. He expected awkwardness or pity or the kind of uncomfortable sympathy that people offered when they didn't know what else to say. Instead, Victoria walked slowly to her desk and sank into the chair. Her hands were trembling. What was her full name? She asked. Ethan frowned. What? Your wife. What was her full name? Lily. Lily Hayes. Before we married, she was Lily Carrington. Victoria went very still. The color drained from her face. Carrington, she whispered. Ethan's pulse spiked. Why are you... What was her birthday? I don't understand. Please. Victoria's voice was tight, controlled, but something desperate leaked through the cracks. Just tell me. March 17th, Ethan said slowly. Why? Victoria opened a drawer in her desk. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out a photograph. Old, creased, the colors slightly faded. She stared at it for a long moment before sliding it across the desk toward him. Ethan picked it up. It showed 2 little girls, maybe 4 and 6 years old, sitting on a porch step. They were laughing, arms wrapped around each other, gap-toothed and sunburned and utterly identical. Twins. That's Lily, Victoria said quietly. On the right. Ethan's world tilted. And the other girl? Victoria met his eyes. Me. Ethan set the photograph down carefully, as if it might shatter. That's impossible. I was born March 17th, Victoria said, in Durham, North Carolina. My parents were Sarah and Michael Carrington. When I was 4, they divorced. It was... She stopped, her jaw tightening. Brutal. My father was an architect. Brilliant. Also an alcoholic. My mother had untreated bipolar disorder. They destroyed each other. Ethan's mind was racing, trying to piece together a puzzle he didn't know existed. Lily never mentioned she wouldn't have. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands gripped the edge of the desk. Because we were separated, the court gave me to my father, gave Lily to my mother. Different cities, different lives. I was told... Her voice wavered. I was told my sister didn't want to see me, that she was better off without me. That's not true. I know that now. Victoria looked at the photograph, her expression raw. It took me 20 years to find her. Ethan's breath caught. You found her? 3 years ago, DNA registry. I'd been searching since I turned 18. When the match came through, She stopped, blinking hard. I didn't believe it at first, but we started emailing, carefully. She was cautious. I didn't blame her. We met once, just once, a weekend in Asheville, 18 months ago. The timeline crashed into Ethan like a freight train. 18 months, he repeated numbly. She told me about you, Victoria said quietly. About Mia, about the life she'd built. She was so proud of you, she said... Her voice broke. She said you made her believe in second chances. Ethan couldn't breathe. We were supposed to meet again, Victoria continued. She wanted to introduce us properly, wanted Mia to know she had an aunt, but then she died. Yes. The silence that followed was enormous. Ethan stared at the woman sitting across from him, the woman he'd been avoiding for 8 months, the woman whose face had felt like a punishment, and saw her clearly for the first time. Not as a ghost, not as a reminder of everything he'd lost, but as someone who had lost her, too. You didn't know, Victoria said. When I took over the company, when I walked onto the floor that first day and saw you standing there, you had no idea who I was. No. And I couldn't tell you because it felt... She stopped, struggling for words. Intrusive, inappropriate. You were grieving. I was your boss. I didn't have the right to... You had every right, Ethan said roughly. She was your sister. A sister I barely knew. That doesn't make it hurt less. Victoria looked at him then, really looked at him, and Ethan saw the same exhaustion in her eyes that he felt in his bones, the same weight, the same loneliness. I kept thinking you'd recognize something, she admitted, a gesture, a mannerism, something that would make you ask, but you never did. I wasn't looking for similarities, Ethan said. I was trying to survive them. Victoria nodded slowly. I understand that now. Assam. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the city moved on, traffic humming, cranes swinging across construction sites, the ordinary machinery of life grinding forward without pause. Inside Victoria's office, time felt suspended. Finally, Ethan spoke. Did she... His voice was rough. Did she tell you anything else? About us? Victoria hesitated, then reached into her desk again. She pulled out a small stack of papers, printed emails, folded and worn from being read too many times. She wrote to me every week, Victoria said quietly, from the day we reconnected until... She stopped. Until 2 days before she died. Ethan's hands trembled as he took the pages. The first email was dated 3 years earlier. Victoria, I don't know how to start this. I've spent my whole life believing I didn't have a sister, that I was alone. And now here you are, and I don't know what to do with that. But I want to try. I want to know you. I want to understand what happened to us. If you're willing... Lily Ethan's throat tightened. He turned to the next page. Victoria, you asked about my life. It's small, beautifully small. I married a man named Ethan 3 years ago. He's an architect, like Dad, I guess, though I didn't make the connection until just now. He's kind, patient. He makes me laugh even when I'm being impossible. We have a daughter, Mia. She just turned 2. She has his eyes and my stubbornness. I never thought I'd have this. A family. After everything with Mom, I didn't think I was capable of it. But Ethan, He made me believe I deserved it. I wish you could meet them. Lily. Ethan had to stop reading, his vision blurred. He set the pages down carefully, pressing the heel of his hand against his eyes. She loved you, Victoria said quietly. She wrote about you constantly, about how you'd bring her coffee in bed, how you'd dance with Mia in the kitchen, how you'd stay up late sketching buildings that didn't exist yet just because you loved the possibility of them. Ethan couldn't speak. She was planning to tell you about me, Victoria continued. She wanted to wait until we'd spent more time together, until she was sure it was real. She didn't want to hurt you if it fell apart. It wouldn't have, Ethan said hoarsely. No, Victoria agreed. It wouldn't have. They sat with that for a moment, the loss of what might have been. I searched for her obituary, Victoria admitted. After she stopped responding to emails, I thought maybe she'd changed her mind, decided I wasn't worth the complication. But then I found it, and Her composure cracked. I couldn't breathe. I just found her, and she was already gone. Ethan looked up, saw the tears Victoria was fighting to hold back. I went to the funeral, she said quietly. I stood in the back. I saw you. Saw Mia. I wanted to say something, to tell you who I was, but it felt wrong, selfish. You were drowning, and I was a stranger. You weren't a stranger, Ethan said. You were her sister. A sister she never got to claim. The words hung heavy between them. Ethan thought about that day, the funeral, the endless receiving line, the faces blurring together into a parade of sympathy he couldn't process. He tried to remember if he'd seen her, if some part of him had recognized the resemblance, but grief had made him blind to everything except the unbearable fact of Lily's absence. When I took over the company, Victoria said, I didn't know you worked here. My father never mentioned names, just project numbers and budgets. And then on my first day, you walked into the conference room, and She stopped. I knew immediately. Lily had sent me photos. Of you, of Mia. I recognized you. Why didn't you say anything? Because you looked at me, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. And I saw your face. I saw the shock, the pain. And I realized that to you I wasn't Lily's sister. I was just a ghost, Ethan finished. Yes. He understood now. The careful distance she'd maintained, the formality, the way she'd never pushed when he avoided her. She'd been trying to protect him, trying to protect herself. I thought if I stayed professional, Victoria said, if I kept my distance, eventually it would get easier. For both of us. But it didn't. It just got worse. Yes. Ethan stood slowly, moving to the window. Charlotte sprawled below them, all glass and steel in relentless forward motion. He thought about the last 8 months, the meetings he'd fled, the conversations he'd cut short, the deliberate blindness he'd cultivated, all of it to avoid the woman who understood his grief better than anyone else in the world. I'm sorry, he said, for avoiding you, for making this harder than it had to be. You were surviving, Victoria said. I understand that. But you were too. Ethan turned to face her. And I made you do it alone. Victoria looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she stood. We're both still here, she said quietly. That's something. Ethan nodded. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Ethan returned to his desk, but he couldn't focus. His mind kept circling back to the conversation, to the photograph of 2 little girls who should have grown up together, to the emails Lily had written, to the impossible coincidence that had brought him and Victoria together under the same roof. Except it wasn't really a coincidence, was it? Lily had worked in architecture before Mia was born. She'd talked about the firm she admired, the projects she wanted to be part of someday. Brennan and Hale had been on that list. Had she known it was her father's company? Had some part of her been drawn to it, even unconsciously? Ethan would never know. What he did know was that Victoria wasn't going anywhere. She was his boss, his colleague, and now, impossibly, his family. He didn't know how to carry that. At 5:30, he packed up his laptop and headed for the daycare center 3 blocks away. Mia was waiting in the play area, her dark curls escaping from their ponytail, her hands covered in purple paint. Daddy! She launched herself at him, and Ethan caught her, lifting her up despite the paint. Hey, Bug, what'd you make today? A dragon! Miss Sarah says it's very fierce. I bet it is. He carried her to the car, listening to her chatter about dragons and snack time and the boy named Owen who always stole the good crayons. It was normal, familiar. The rhythm of single parenthood that he'd learned to navigate through sheer necessity. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, he kept thinking about Victoria's words. She loved you. She wrote about you constantly. He buckled Mia into her car seat and drove home through the September twilight. Their apartment was small, 2 bedrooms in a complex near the university, nothing fancy but clean and safe in theirs. Ethan made dinner while Mia colored at the kitchen table. Spaghetti, Lily's favorite. He hadn't made it since she died. Daddy, why are you crying? Ethan looked down. Mia was staring at him, her crayon frozen mid-stroke. I'm not, Bug. You are. Your face is wet. He wiped his eyes quickly. Just thinking about Mommy. Mia considered this. At 4 years old, she didn't fully understand death. She knew Mommy was gone, that she wasn't coming back. But the permanence of it, the weight, that would come later. Do you miss her? Mia asked. Every day. Me too. She went back to coloring. But it's okay. She's still in our hearts. It was something the grief counselor had told her, a way to make sense of the incomprehensible. Ethan didn't know if he believed it, but he nodded anyway. Yeah, Bug. She is. Later, after Mia was asleep, Ethan sat on the couch with a beer he didn't drink and stared at his phone. He'd typed and deleted 3 different messages to Victoria. All of them felt inadequate. Finally, he settled on something simple. Thank you for telling me. About Lily. About everything. He hit send before he could second guess it. The response came 5 minutes later. Thank you for listening. Ethan set the phone down and closed his eyes. For the first time in 8 months, the grief didn't feel quite so isolating, because someone else was carrying it too. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the office early. He'd barely slept, his mind too full of revelations, of questions, of the strange new reality he was navigating. He made coffee in the break room and settled at his desk, determined to finish the South Park revisions before the deadline. At 8:15, Victoria stepped off the elevator. This time, Ethan didn't look away. She paused when she noticed him watching. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the open floor. 2 people who had lost the same woman, who had been circling each other in careful avoidance for months, who were now standing on uncertain new ground. Victoria nodded once. Ethan nodded back. It wasn't much, but it was something. The day unfolded normally after that. Meetings, emails, the usual chaos of deadlines and client demands. But there was a shift, subtle, almost imperceptible, but real. When Victoria spoke in the team briefing, Ethan listened without flinching. When she passed his desk, he didn't tense. He was learning to see her as Victoria, not as Lily's ghost. It would take time. He knew that. The resemblance was still there, still shocking, still painful in unexpected moments. But it was no longer the only thing he saw. He saw the way she listened with absolute focus when people spoke, the way she asked questions that cut straight to the heart of a problem, the way she never raised her voice but commanded attention anyway. She was like Lily in some ways, but she was also entirely herself. At lunchtime, Ethan took the stairs to the 3rd floor. He didn't plan it, didn't rehearse what he'd say. He just knocked on Victoria's office door. Come in. She looked up from her laptop, surprise flickering across her face. Ethan? Do you have lunch plans? Victoria blinked. No. There's a place a few blocks from here, good sandwiches, quiet. Understanding passed between them. I'd like that, Victoria said quietly. They walked to the cafe in silence, navigating the lunchtime crowds without speaking. It was a small place, local, unpretentious, the kind of spot where regulars knew each other's names. They ordered at the counter and found a table by the window. For a while, they just ate. Then Ethan said, Tell me about her. The weekend you met. Victoria set down her sandwich. It was October. We met in Nashville, neutral territory. Neither of us knew what to expect. Were you nervous? Terrified. A faint smile crossed her face. I'd spent 20 years imagining what she'd be like. And then there she was, and she was real. Yes. Victoria looked out the window. We spent 2 days together, walked around the city, talked for hours. She told me about growing up with our mother. It wasn't... She stopped. It wasn't easy. Mom's illness got worse after the divorce. Lily spent most of her childhood managing it. Ethan's chest tightened. Lily had told him some of it, the instability, the fear, the parentification that had forced her to grow up too fast. But she'd never mentioned having a sister who'd been taken away. She didn't hold it against you, Victoria said quietly. She understood why our father got custody of me. She just wished that she could have come too. Yes. They sat with that for a moment. What was she like? Victoria asked. When you knew her? Ethan thought about it. Strong, stubborn. She had this way of making you believe anything was possible if you worked hard enough. She loved terrible reality TV. She sang off key in the shower. She cried at dog food commercials. Victoria laughed, a soft, startled sound. She told me about the dog food commercials. Did she tell you she wanted to adopt every stray animal she saw? She mentioned a tendency toward impulsive rescue missions. Mia gets that from her. Ethan smiled despite himself. Last month she tried to bring home a turtle from the park. I had to explain property laws to a 4-year-old. Victoria's expression softened. How is Mia? Really? She's okay, I think. She asks about Lily sometimes, wants to know if Mommy can see her from heaven. I don't know what to tell her. The truth, Victoria said, that you don't know, but that her mother loved her. I do tell her that. Then you're doing it right. They finished their lunch talking about small things, work projects, Charlotte traffic, the weather, normal things, safe things. But underneath it all was the weight of shared loss, the recognition that they were navigating the same impossible terrain. When they walked back to the office, Ethan felt something shift. Not resolution, not closure, but maybe the beginning of something else. The weeks that followed were strange. Ethan and Victoria fell into a new rhythm, professional but no longer distant. They spoke in meetings without Ethan avoiding her gaze. They passed in hallways without tension crackling between them. They were learning to exist in the same space without the weight of resemblance crushing everything else. But it wasn't easy. There were still moments when Victoria would tilt her head a certain way or laugh at something unexpected, and Ethan would feel grief slam into him all over again. There were still mornings when he walked onto the floor and saw her standing by the window, and for one brutal second his heart would leap before reality crashed back down. She wasn't Lily. She would never be Lily. And slowly, painfully, Ethan was learning to accept that. One evening in late September, Victoria stayed late at the office. Ethan was packing up when he saw the light still on in her office. He hesitated, then climbed the stairs. She was at her desk, surrounded by blueprints and budget reports, her hair pulled back, her sleeves rolled up. You should go home, Ethan said from the doorway. Victoria looked up, startled. I could say the same to you. I have a 4-year-old waiting. What's your excuse? She smiled faintly. Perfectionism. Lily had that too. The words slipped out before Ethan could stop them. Victoria's smile faded. I'm sorry, Ethan said quickly. I didn't mean... It's okay. Victoria set down her pen. You're allowed to see the similarities. I'm trying not to. Why? The question caught him off guard. Because it's not fair to you, Ethan said. You're not her. You shouldn't have to carry that. Victoria stood, moving around the desk. What if I want to? Ethan frowned. What? She was my sister, Victoria said quietly. For 20 years I didn't know her, and then for 18 months I had her. And now she's gone. But you... She stopped, her voice thick. You carry her every day, in your memories. In Mia, in the way you talk about her. And I... Her composure cracked. I want that too. I want to know what she was like when she was happy, when she was loved. I want to know the woman you knew. Ethan's throat tightened. You're asking me to tell you about her. Yes. He didn't know if he could do that. Didn't know if he was strong enough to open those wounds again. But then he looked at Victoria, really looked at her, and saw the same desperate need that he felt every time he looked at Mia, the need to keep Lily alive. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll tell you." They started meeting on Thursdays after work. Not at the office, that felt too formal, too constrained. Instead, they went to a small wine bar in Dilworth, a place Lily had loved. Ethan hadn't been back since she died. Walking through the door felt like stepping into memory. The first night they sat at the bar and Ethan talked. He told Victoria about the day he met Lily, at a gallery opening neither of them particularly cared about, both of them hiding near the exit, waiting for a polite moment to leave. He told her about their first date, a disaster of a hike that ended with Lily twisting her ankle and Ethan carrying her a mile back to the car. He told her about the proposal, which he'd planned meticulously and then completely botched because he was so nervous. Victoria listened without interrupting, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "She said yes anyway?" she asked. "She said yes before I even finished the question." Victoria laughed. "That sounds like her. She was never patient." "No," Ethan agreed. She wasn't. He told her about the pregnancy, how terrified Lily had been, how certain she was that she'd be a terrible mother because of her own upbringing, how she'd cried when Mia was born, overwhelmed by the realization that she was capable of this kind of love. "She was a good mother," Ethan said. "She worried constantly that she wasn't, but she was." "I wish I could have seen that," Victoria said softly. "Me too." The second Thursday, Victoria brought something with her, a box of photographs she'd found in her father's storage unit, pictures of the twins as babies, as toddlers, before the divorce tore them apart. She spread them across the table, and they went through them one by one. "Look at this one," Victoria said, pointing to a photo of two little girls covered in mud, grinning at the camera. "We must have been 3. You're identical." "We were." Victoria's voice was wistful. "I don't remember any of it. I was too young when they separated us." Ethan studied the photo. Even then, there were small differences. Lily's smile slightly wider, Victoria's posture more reserved, the seeds of who they'd become. "She would have wanted you to have these," Ethan said. Victoria looked at him. "Will you make me a promise?" "What?" "Will you let me know Mia?" Her voice was careful, tentative. Not as her boss's boss, not as some distant connection, but as family. "Yes." Ethan thought about it, about what Lily would have wanted, about the sister she'd searched for and found too late. "She should know her aunt," he said finally. Victoria's eyes filled. "Thank you." The following Sunday, Ethan invited Victoria to lunch. Nothing formal, just pizza and chaos in his small apartment. Mia was skeptical at first, hiding behind Ethan's leg when Victoria arrived. "Who's that?" she whispered. "This is Victoria," Ethan said. "She's—" He hesitated, then settled on the truth. "She was your mommy's sister." Mia peeked around his leg, studying Victoria with solemn 4-year-old intensity. "You look like Mommy!" Victoria crouched down to Mia's level. "I know, we were twins." "What's twins?" "It means we were born on the same day, and we looked exactly alike." Mia considered this. "Did you like dragons?" Victoria smiled. "I don't know. Do you?" "I love dragons. They're fierce." "Then I probably love them too, because sisters are usually alike." Mia thought about this, then held out her hand. "Want to see my dragon drawing?" Victoria took her hand. "I'd love to." Ethan watched them disappear into Mia's room, something tight in his chest loosening just slightly. This was what Lily would have wanted. Not grief, not avoidance, but connection. When Victoria emerged 20 minutes later, she was carrying a purple dragon drawing and fighting back tears. "She's wonderful," she said quietly. "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "She is." They ate pizza at the kitchen table, greasy, imperfect, exactly the kind of meal Lily used to insist on for Sunday lunches. Mia talked non-stop, showing Victoria her toy collection, her books, her very fierce stuffed dragon named Smoke. "Mommy gave me Smoke," Mia said, "before she went to heaven." Victoria's hand tightened on her water glass. "Did she?" Uh-huh. Daddy says she's watching over me." I think that's true, Victoria said softly. After lunch, while Mia napped, Ethan and Victoria sat on the small balcony overlooking the parking lot. It wasn't much of a view, but the afternoon sun was warm and the air smelled like autumn. Thank you, Victoria said, for letting me in. Thank you for wanting in. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Can I ask you something? Ethan said finally. Of course. Do you ever resent it that I got the years with her that you didn't? Victoria looked at him, her expression thoughtful. No, because she was happy with you, and that's what I would have wanted for her. Ethan nodded slowly. I'm glad she found you, Victoria said. Before the end. I'm glad she got to tell someone about me, even if it was only in emails. She loved you, Ethan said. She wanted you in her life. I know. Victoria's voice was thick. And now. She stopped, struggling for words. Now I get to love the family she left behind. That's something. It was. As October arrived, bringing cooler air and the first hints of color to the trees, Ethan found himself looking forward to Thursdays, to the conversations that ranged from painful to funny to quietly profound. Victoria told him about growing up with their father, about his brilliance and his demons, about the loneliness of being raised by someone who loved his work more than he loved people. Ethan told her about Lily's last year, about the ordinary joys and mundane struggles, about the way she'd started painting again after Mia was born, about the plans she'd had for the future that would never happen. They grieved together, and slowly, in the space that grief created, something else began to grow. Not romance. Neither of them was ready for that, might never be ready for that. But friendship, connection, the recognition that they were bound together by more than just loss. One Thursday evening in mid-October, they returned to the restaurant where Lily and Victoria had met for the first time. Ethan had never been there before, but Victoria described it in such detail that he felt like he had. They ordered wine and talked for hours. She sat right there, Victoria said, pointing to a corner booth. She ordered the salmon. She was so nervous her hands were shaking. Were you nervous? Terrified. I'd spent 20 years imagining that moment, and I was so afraid I'd say the wrong thing, that she'd realize I wasn't worth finding. She never thought that. I know. Victoria smiled sadly. She told me that weekend. She said she'd been angry for a long time. Angry at our parents for splitting us up. Angry at the system that kept us apart. But she wasn't angry at me. Ethan thought about the emails Victoria had shown him, about Lily's careful words, her tentative hope. She wanted to build something with you, he said. A real relationship. We were going to, Victoria said. She was planning to bring Mia to meet me. We were talking about Christmas, and then, I know. They sat with that silence. I keep thinking, Victoria said finally, about what she'd want from us now, from you and me. What do you think she'd want? I think she'd want us to be okay, to take care of each other, to make sure Mia knows where she came from. I think you're right. Victoria looked at him, her gray eyes steady. And I think she'd want you to be happy again, eventually. Ethan's throat tightened. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, Victoria admitted, but maybe we can figure it out together. It wasn't a promise, it wasn't a plan, but it was enough. As they left the restaurant that night, walking out into the cool October air, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in 18 months. Not happiness, exactly, but possibility. The grief was still there, would always be there. But it wasn't the only thing anymore. And as he looked at Victoria, not seeing Lily's ghost, but seeing the woman who had searched for 20 years to find her sister, who had lost her too soon, who was trying just as hard as he was to build something good from the wreckage, he thought maybe that was enough. For now, it was enough. November arrived with a cold snap that turned Charlotte's streets silver with frost. Ethan stood in the office parking garage at 7 in the morning, watching his breath cloud in the air as he waited for his car to warm up. The radio droned about traffic on I-77, but he wasn't listening. His mind was stuck on the conversation he'd had with Mia the night before. Is Victoria coming for Thanksgiving? She'd asked, her crayon pausing over a drawing of a turkey with improbable purple feathers. Ethan had looked up from the dishes. I don't know, Bug. I haven't asked her yet. You should ask her. She's family. The simple certainty in Mia's voice had hit him harder than he expected. 4 years old, and she already understood something he was still struggling to accept. Victoria was family. Not in the way Lily had been. That space was permanent, unchangeable, still raw even after 18 months. But family nonetheless. The thread connecting them wasn't just grief anymore. It was something more complicated, more intentional. He pulled out of the garage and drove through the dark streets toward the office. The city was just waking up. Coffee shops flipping their signs to open. Joggers brave enough to face the cold moving along the sidewalks in small, determined clusters. By the time he reached the tower, the sun was starting to break over the eastern horizon, painting the glass buildings in shades of amber and gold. Victoria's car was already in the lot. Ethan found her on the third floor, standing at the window of her office with a coffee cup cradled in both hands. She didn't turn when he knocked, but her reflection in the glass showed she'd heard him. "You're here early," she said. "So are you." "Couldn't sleep." Ethan stepped into the office. "Bad night?" Victoria took a sip of her coffee before answering. "Just thinking." "About what?" She turned to face him then, and Ethan saw the exhaustion in her eyes. "About how my father died 3 years ago and I never told Lily. About how I was so focused on protecting myself, on not getting hurt if she rejected me, that I wasted time we didn't have." The pain in her voice was raw, unguarded. "You didn't waste it," Ethan said quietly. "You spent 18 months building something with her. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing now." "I know." Ethan moved to stand beside her at the window. "But Mia asked about you last night. She wants to know if you're coming for Thanksgiving." Victoria looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. "You're inviting me. If you don't have other plans." "I don't." Her voice was soft. "I usually work through the holidays." "Then don't. Come to us. It won't be fancy. I'm not much of a cook, but Mia would love it, and I—" He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "I think Lily would want you there." Victoria's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. "Okay. Okay. Yes, I'll come." They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the city brighten below them. Then Victoria said something that changed everything. "The board wants to meet with me next week." Ethan frowned. "About what?" "About us." His stomach dropped. "What about us?" Victoria set her coffee cup down with deliberate care. "Someone noticed that we've been spending time together outside of work. Someone else noticed the resemblance between me and—" She stopped. "Between me and your late wife. And now there are questions about conflict of interest." "That's insane. We're family." "Family that no one knew about until recently." Victoria's voice was tight with controlled frustration. "And technically, I'm your direct supervisor. The optics are complicated." Ethan felt anger rising in his chest. "So what are they suggesting? That we stop talking? That you fire me?" "I don't know yet, but I wanted you to be prepared." She met his eyes. "Whatever happens, I'm not going to let them turn this into something ugly. Lily deserves better than that." "So do you." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "Thank you. When's the meeting?" "Wednesday, 2 o'clock. "I should be there." "You can't be. It's a closed session." "Then I'll wait outside." Victoria shook her head. "Ethan, I'm not letting you face this alone," he said firmly. "Lily would never forgive me." For a moment, Victoria looked like she might argue. Then something in her posture shifted. Acceptance, maybe, or gratitude. "Okay," she said quietly, "but stay out of sight. I don't want to give them more ammunition." "Deal." The days leading up to Wednesday crawled past with agonizing slowness. Ethan tried to focus on work. The South Park project was entering its final phase, and there were 1,000 details that needed his attention. But his mind kept circling back to the board meeting. He knew how these things worked. He'd seen colleagues pushed out over lesser conflicts. The architecture world was small, competitive, obsessed with propriety. And he and Victoria had violated that propriety simply by existing in proximity to each other. On Tuesday evening, he called his mother in Raleigh. She'd been asking to visit for weeks, wanting to see Mia, and he'd been putting her off. Now he needed her voice, steady, practical, grounding. "Ethan, honey, what's wrong?" she asked the moment she heard his tone. He told her everything. About Victoria being Lily's sister, about the board meeting, about the impossible situation they'd found themselves in through no fault of their own. His mother listened without interrupting, the way she always did. "What do you want to happen?" she asked when he finished. "I want them to leave us alone. We're not doing anything wrong." "I know that, but what do you want? Not for the board, for you." Ethan looked across the living room to where Mia was watching a cartoon, Smoke the Dragon tucked under her arm. "I want Mia to know her aunt. I want Victoria to have the family she searched for. I want—" He stopped, the admission catching in his throat. "I want to stop feeling so alone." "Oh, sweetheart. I know it's complicated. I know people will judge. But Mom, she's all I have left of Lily, the only person who understands what it was like to lose her." "Then fight for that," his mother said firmly. "Don't let some board full of strangers tell you how to grieve. Don't let them take away the one good thing that's come out of this nightmare." Ethan closed his eyes. "I'm scared I'll lose my job." "Then you'll find another job. But you won't find another sister for Mia. You won't find another person who loved Lily the way Victoria did." She was right. He knew she was right. "Thanks, Mom." "Any time, honey." "And Ethan, tell Victoria she has family in Raleigh too. She's welcome here whenever she wants." When he hung up, Ethan felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty. He was too much of a realist for that. But resolve. Whatever happened on Wednesday, he would face it. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold, the sky threatening rain. Ethan dressed carefully. The charcoal suit Lily had picked out for him 3 years ago, the blue tie she'd claimed, brought out his eyes. Armor for a battle he couldn't fight directly, but refused to abandon. He dropped Mia at daycare and drove to the office, arriving at 1:30. The board met in the executive conference room on the 4th floor, a space Ethan had only been in a handful of times, always for major presentations or company-wide announcements. Today, it felt like a courtroom. Victoria was already there when he arrived, standing outside the closed doors in a black suit that made her look older, more formidable. When she saw him, relief flashed across her face before she controlled it. "You didn't have to come," she said. "Yes, I did." They stood together in the hallway, not speaking, listening to the muffled voices from inside. Ethan recognized some of them: Richard Brennan, the founder's son and current board chair; Margaret Chen, the CFO; David Okonkwo, head of business development; people he'd worked with for years, people who'd sent flowers when Lily died, people who were now sitting in judgment of his right to know his wife's sister. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door opened. Richard Brennan stepped out, mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of man who wore authority like a well-tailored suit. "Victoria, we're ready for you." Victoria straightened her shoulders. She glanced at Ethan once, a look that said everything she couldn't say out loud, then walked into the conference room. The door closed behind her with a decisive click. Ethan sank into one of the chairs lining the hallway and waited. 20 minutes passed. 30, 45. Through the heavy door, he could hear the rise and fall of voices but couldn't make out words. He checked his phone compulsively. No messages, no updates, just the slow crawl of time on the screen. At 3:15, the door opened again. Margaret Chen emerged first, her expression unreadable. Then David Okonkwo, who nodded politely at Ethan but didn't stop. Then the others, board members whose names Ethan knew but whose faces blurred together in his anxiety. Finally, Victoria stepped out. She looked shaken but composed. When she met Ethan's eyes, he couldn't read what had happened. Richard Brennan was the last to leave. He paused when he saw Ethan. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't realize you were here." Ethan stood. "I wanted to be available, in case I was needed." "That won't be necessary." Brennan's tone was formal, distant. "But I appreciate your dedication to the firm." It wasn't a compliment, it was a warning. When Brennan disappeared into the elevator, Ethan turned to Victoria. "What happened?" She shook her head. "Not here." They took the stairs down to the parking garage in silence. Victoria's car was on the lower level, tucked in the corner away from the security cameras. Only when they were standing beside it, hidden from view, did she finally speak. "They know everything about Lily, about the DNA search, about the weekend in Asheville." Her voice was tight. Someone did a background check on me, probably when I took over as CEO. They found the connection. Why bring it up now? Because someone on the board noticed us having lunch together, noticed me going to your apartment, noticed... She stopped, frustration bleeding through her control. Noticed that we look like each other. Or rather, that I look like your dead wife. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. What did you tell them? The truth. That Lily was my sister. That I'd been searching for her for 20 years. That we met once before she died. That I had no idea you worked here when I took the position. Victoria leaned against her car, exhausted. I told them that you're my family. That Mia is my niece. That there is no conflict of interest because there is no romantic relationship and never will be. The words landed with unexpected weight. What did they say? Ethan asked quietly. They want documentation, proof of the family connection. They want me to recuse myself from any decisions involving your employment, promotions, raises, project assignments. They want us to maintain appropriate professional boundaries in the office. She laughed bitterly. Whatever that means. Did they threaten to fire you? No, but they made it very clear that my position is contingent on managing this situation properly. Victoria looked at him, her gray eyes blazing. They called you a situation, Ethan. They called my relationship with my niece a potential liability. Anger surged through Ethan's chest. This is insane. This is corporate America. So what do we do? Victoria pushed off from the car. We give them what they want. Documentation, boundaries, complete transparency, and then we continue living our lives exactly as we have been because we're not doing anything wrong. And if they push back, then I'll resign. Ethan stared at her. You can't do that. Watch me. Her voice was steel. I spent 20 years looking for my sister. I'm not going to lose what's left of her because some board is worried about optics. The fierce protectiveness in her voice reminded Ethan so much of Lily that his chest ached. But this was Victoria, fighting not for herself, but for the family she'd finally found. Okay, he said. What do you need from me? Birth certificates, marriage license, Lily's death certificate. Victoria ticked them off on her fingers. Anything that proves the family connection. And I need you to be prepared for scrutiny. People will talk. They'll make assumptions. Let them. Victoria studied him for a long moment. You're sure about this? Because once we submit that documentation, everyone will know. Your colleagues, your clients. There's no taking it back. Ethan thought about Mia asking when Victoria was coming for Thanksgiving, about the Thursday evenings at the wine bar, sharing stories about Lily, about the way Victoria had crouched down to Mia's level and asked about dragons with genuine interest. I'm sure, he said. That night, Ethan pulled out the file box he kept in the back of his closet. He hadn't opened it since Lily's funeral, hadn't been able to face the weight of official documents that reduced her life to dates and signatures. But now he sorted through them with careful hands. Marriage license, birth certificate, death certificate, the paper trail of a life that had been too short. He made copies of everything and sealed them in an envelope addressed to Victoria. Then he sat on the edge of his bed and allowed himself to cry. Not for the first time since Lily died, not even for the 100th time. But this felt different. This felt like he was fighting for something instead of just drowning in loss. When he finally pulled himself together, Mia was standing in the doorway in her purple pajamas, clutching smoke. Daddy, why are you sad? Ethan wiped his eyes quickly. Just missing Mommy. Mia climbed onto the bed beside him. Is Victoria okay? The question surprised him. What do you mean? You said she's Mommy's sister, so she must miss Mommy too. Out of the mouths of children. Yeah, Bug, Ethan said softly. She does. Then we should take care of her, like she takes care of us. Ethan pulled Mia into his lap, pressing his face into her curls. You're right, we should. Is she still coming for Thanksgiving? I hope so. Good. I want to show her my other dragon drawings. The next morning, Ethan delivered the envelope to Victoria's office before the rest of the staff arrived. She was already at her desk looking like she hadn't slept. Everything you need, he said, setting the envelope in front of her. Victoria opened it, her hands steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. She flipped through the documents slowly, pausing on the death certificate. Cerebral aneurysm, she read quietly. Sudden cardiac death secondary to... She stopped, closing the file. I never saw the medical report. I didn't want to know the details. Sometimes the details make it worse, Ethan said, and sometimes they make it real. Victoria looked up at him. Thank you for this. I know it wasn't easy. Nothing about this is easy. No, she agreed, but we're doing it anyway. She submitted the documentation that afternoon. By Friday, the entire office knew. Ethan felt the shift immediately. Colleagues who'd been friendly suddenly distant. Conversations that stopped when he entered rooms, sidelong glances that carried questions people were too polite to ask out loud. Only Jason Chen, one of the junior architects, had the courage to approach him directly. They were in the break room, Ethan refilling his coffee when Jason leaned against the counter. So it's true? Your boss is your dead wife's twin sister. Ethan's jaw tightened. Yes. That's... Jason searched for words. I mean, that's gotta be weird, right? It's complicated. I bet. Jason grabbed a donut from the box someone had brought in. People are saying she looks exactly like your wife, that you can't tell them apart. There are differences. But the resemblance is... Jason, Ethan's voice was sharp. What are you really asking? Jason had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm just trying to understand how you deal with it. Seeing her every day. I can't imagine. Then don't. Ethan grabbed his coffee and walked out. He made it to the stairwell before the anger gave way to something raw. He sat on the steps, his coffee growing cold in his hands, and tried to remember how to breathe through the tightness in his chest. The door above him opened. Footsteps descended. Victoria appeared around the corner. Jason told me what he said, she said quietly. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Isn't it? She sat down beside him on the step. If I hadn't taken this job, if I'd stayed away, then Mia would never know she has an aunt, and I would still be drowning in grief with no one who understands. Ethan looked at her. Jason's an idiot. He doesn't get to decide what this is. And what is this? Victoria asked. It was the same question she'd asked weeks ago, standing in her office. But now it felt different. Now it felt like it mattered. Family, Ethan said firmly. Messy and complicated, and not what anyone expected. But family. Victoria's eyes were bright. Okay. Okay? Yes. She stood, offering him her hand. Come on. We have work to do. Ethan took her hand and let her pull him to his feet. The gossip continued through the following week, but Ethan stopped caring. He focused on his projects, on Mia, on the Thanksgiving dinner that was rapidly approaching. Victoria had offered to bring wine and dessert, pumpkin pie, she'd said, because Lily had always loved pumpkin pie. How do you know that? Ethan had asked. She told me. In one of her emails, she said you made fun of her for putting whipped cream on everything. I did. She'd put whipped cream on pizza if I let her. Victoria had smiled. I do that too. These small revelations, the ways Victoria carried echoes of Lily without being her, had become precious. They were building a new kind of connection, one that honored the past without being trapped in it. On the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Ethan's mother called. I'm coming to Charlotte, she announced, for the holiday. I want to meet Victoria. Ethan closed his eyes. Mom. Don't mom me. If she's family, I want to know her. Besides, Mia needs her grandmother. And you need backup. I don't need backup. Everyone needs backup, sweetheart. I'll be there Wednesday afternoon. She hung up before he could argue. When Ethan told Victoria, she looked terrified. Your mother wants to meet me? Apparently. What if she hates me? What if she thinks I'm trying to replace Lily? She won't think that. Ethan said it with more confidence than he felt. His mother had loved Lily fiercely. How would she respond to a woman who wore Lily's face but wasn't her? Wednesday afternoon, Ethan picked his mother up from the train station. Susan Hayes was 62, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and possessed of the kind of maternal intuition that made lying to her impossible. She hugged Ethan tightly, then held him at arm's length. You look tired. See, I am tired. But you're eating? Yes, Mom. And Mia's doing okay? She's great. She made you a drawing. Susan smiled. I can't wait to see it. Now tell me about Victoria. They drove to the apartment while Ethan tried to explain what couldn't really be explained. By the time they pulled into the parking lot, his mother had heard the whole story. The DNA search, the weekend in Asheville, the board meeting, the documentation. That poor girl, Susan said quietly, searching for 20 years and finding her sister just in time to lose her. I know. And now she has you and Mia. If the board doesn't force us apart, Susan's expression hardened. They won't. Not if I have anything to say about it. Victoria arrived at 6, clutching a bottle of wine in a bakery box with white-knuckled tension. Ethan opened the door to find her standing there looking more nervous than he'd ever seen her. Hi, she said. Hi, come in. Susan was sitting on the couch with Mia, admiring the dragon drawing, when Victoria entered. She looked up, and Ethan watched his mother's face go through a series of rapid emotions: shock, recognition, grief, and finally something softer. She stood. You must be Victoria. Mrs. Hayes, it's... Victoria's voice wavered. It's good to meet you. Susan crossed the room and, without warning, pulled Victoria into a hug. Victoria stood frozen for a moment, then slowly, carefully, hugged her back. You look so much like her, Susan whispered. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Susan pulled back, her eyes wet. It's not your fault you have her face, and you're not responsible for other people's grief. Victoria's composure cracked. Thank you. Now come sit. Mia wants to show you her dragon collection. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Mia performed a full dramatic presentation of her dragons, complete with sound effects. Susan asked Victoria gentle questions about her life, her work, her memories of the father they'd shared. Victoria answered carefully at first, then with growing comfort as she realized Susan wasn't judging her. Over dinner, spaghetti again because Mia insisted, Susan told stories about Lily that Victoria had never heard, about her wedding day, about the pregnancy, about the way she'd cried when she first held Mia. She was terrified, Susan said, convinced she'd be a terrible mother because of how she grew up. But the moment Mia was placed in her arms, all that fear just vanished. She looked at that baby and knew exactly what to do. Victoria was crying openly now. I wish I could have seen that. So do I, sweetheart. So do I. After Mia went to bed, the three of them sat in the living room with wine and the exhaustion of emotional honesty. Susan asked Victoria about her plans for the future. I don't know, Victoria admitted. The board is watching everything I do. If I make one wrong move, then you leave, Susan said firmly, and you find a firm that deserves you. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You're brilliant, you're talented, and you have family now who will support you no matter what. Susan looked at Ethan. Right? Ethan met Victoria's eyes. Right. Victoria's face did something complicated. I don't know what I did to deserve this. You searched for your sister for 20 years, Susan said. You found her, you loved her, and now you're loving the people she left behind. That's what you did. Later, after Susan had gone to bed in Mia's room and Mia had been relocated to Ethan's bed, Ethan walked Victoria to her car. Your mother is wonderful, Victoria said. She liked you. How can you tell? She hugged you. She doesn't hug everyone. Victoria smiled. I'm glad I came. So am I. They stood in the parking lot, the November air cold enough to see their breath. Above them, stars pierced the light pollution of the city. Ethan, Victoria said quietly, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you still see her when you look at me? Ethan considered the question carefully. A month ago, the answer would have been an immediate yes, but now, sometimes, he said honestly. When you tilt your head a certain way, when you laugh, but mostly, he stopped, searching for the right words. Mostly, I see you, Victoria. Not Lily's ghost, not a replacement, just you. Victoria's eyes filled. That's all I wanted. I know. She got into her car, but before she drove away, she rolled down the window. Happy Thanksgiving, Ethan. Happy Thanksgiving. He watched her taillights disappear into the night, then walked back upstairs to his apartment, where his mother was probably still awake, where his daughter was probably sprawled sideways across his bed, where tomorrow they would cook a turkey and pretend to know what they were doing and be grateful for the family they'd managed to cobble together from grief and coincidence and choice. And for the first time since Lily died, Ethan thought maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. Thanksgiving morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, the kind of bright November day that felt like a gift after weeks of gray cold. Ethan woke to find Mia already awake, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with her entire dragon collection arranged in what appeared to be a military formation. "They're getting ready for Victoria," she announced when she saw him. "The dragons are getting ready?" "Yes. Smoke is the general. He's in charge of welcoming her properly." Ethan rubbed his eyes, trying to summon the energy required to parse 4-year-old logic before coffee. "That's very thoughtful of Smoke." "I know." Mia adjusted a purple dragon's position with intense concentration. "Grandma says Victoria might be nervous, so we have to make her feel welcome." In the kitchen, Susan was already working on the turkey, despite Ethan's protests the night before that he would handle it. She looked up when he entered, flour dusting her hands. "I couldn't sleep," she said before he could comment, "and this bird isn't going to prepare itself." "Mom, you're a guest." "I'm a grandmother. There's a difference." She wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Besides, you're handling the sides. I saw your menu: sweet potato casserole, green bean almondine, homemade cranberry sauce, Lily's recipes, all of them." Ethan's throat tightened. "I wanted it to feel like she's here." Susan's voice was gentle. "I know, sweetheart, and it's beautiful. But don't forget that Victoria never got to have Thanksgiving with Lily. This is her first one with family in 20 years. The weight of that landed hard. Ethan thought about Victoria's apartment, sleek, modern, impersonal in the way of spaces that were meant for sleeping and not much else. He thought about her working through holidays, filling the emptiness with spreadsheets and conference calls. "I don't want to make this harder for her," he said quietly. "Then make it about the present, not the past." Susan returned her attention to the turkey. "Now go wake up properly and help me with this stuffing. Your recipe card says sage, but I can't find any in your spice cabinet." They worked together through the morning, falling into the familiar rhythm of holiday preparation. Mia helped where she could, mostly by taste testing everything and providing running commentary from the dragons. By noon, the apartment smelled like butter and herbs, and the particular alchemy that only happens when too many dishes compete for oven space. Victoria arrived at 1 o'clock exactly, carrying 2 bottles of wine and a pie box from the bakery Lily had loved. She'd changed out of her usual professional attire into jeans and a cream sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger this way, less guarded. Mia launched herself at Victoria the moment she walked through the door. "You're here? The dragons have been waiting." Victoria caught her, laughing. "Have they? I hope I'm not late." "You're perfectly on time," Susan called from the kitchen. "Come in, and let me take those." The afternoon unfolded with the particular chaos of family gatherings, food that refused to cooperate, last-minute adjustments to the table settings, Mia's insistence that each dragon needed its own place card. Victoria fit into it all more easily than Ethan expected, helping mash potatoes while Susan basted the turkey, listening patiently while Mia explained the complex hierarchy of dragon society. At one point, Ethan found Victoria standing alone in the living room, staring at the photographs on the wall. Most were of Mia, birthday parties, park visits, ordinary moments captured and frozen. But there was one of Lily, taken a month before she died. She was laughing at something off camera, her hair catching the light, her expression unguarded and joyful. "That was at the park," Ethan said quietly, coming to stand beside Victoria. Mia had just learned to pump her legs on the swing. Lily was so proud. Victoria didn't speak for a long moment. "She looks happy," she said finally. She was. That whole last year, she was really happy. "I'm glad." Victoria's voice was thick. "I'm glad she had that she had you and Mia and moments like this." Ethan wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the grief in her eyes. But before he could, Mia appeared between them. "Dinner's ready. Grandma says we have to sit down before everything gets cold." They gathered around the small dining table that Ethan had extended to its full length for the first time since Lily's funeral. It was cramped, dishes overlapping, elbows competing for space, but it felt right. Susan sat at one end, Ethan at the other, with Victoria and Mia on the sides. "Should we say grace?" Susan asked. Ethan tensed, remembering Victoria's instruction about avoiding religious references. But his mother must have seen something in his face because she quickly added, "Or perhaps we could just share what we're grateful for." Mia's hand shot up. "I'll go first. I'm grateful for dragons and Daddy and Grandma and Victoria and smoke and pumpkin pie." Susan smiled. "I'm grateful for my beautiful granddaughter, for my son who's stronger than he knows, and for new family members who honor old ones." She looked at Victoria when she said it, and Victoria's eyes filled. Ethan cleared his throat. "I'm grateful that Mia's healthy and happy, that my mom made the trip, and that—" He looked at Victoria. "That Lily found her sister before it was too late, even if their time was short." All eyes turned to Victoria. She wiped at her eyes quickly, trying to compose herself. "I'm grateful," she said quietly, "that I found Lily when I did, that she told me about Ethan and Mia, and that I'm sitting here now with people who loved her too, who helped me feel like she's not completely gone." Mia reached over and patted Victoria's hand. "She's not gone. She's in our hearts. That's what Daddy says." Victoria let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Your daddy's very wise." They ate until they were uncomfortably full, then somehow found room for pie. The conversation ranged from Mia's plans to train real dragons when she grew up to Susan's stories about Ethan's childhood to Victoria's careful questions about Lily's wedding. It was easier than Ethan expected, talking about her, remembering her, keeping her present in the room without letting grief overwhelm everything. After dinner, while Susan supervised Mia's bath, Ethan and Victoria cleaned up the kitchen. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Victoria washing while Ethan dried until Victoria spoke. "Thank you for including me today." "Your family, where else would you be?" "I don't know. I've spent so many holidays alone that it feels normal now." She scrubbed at a stubborn bit of cranberry sauce. "But this feels like what I was missing all those years." Ethan set down a plate carefully. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What was it like growing up with your father?" Victoria's hand stilled in the soapy water. "Lonely. He was brilliant. You can see that in the buildings he designed, but he was also broken. The drinking got worse after the divorce. By the time I was in high school, I was basically raising myself." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me to be independent, self-sufficient." She resumed washing. "But it also taught me that family was something other people had, something I'd lost my chance at. And then you found Lily. And then I found Lily." Victoria's voice went soft. "That weekend in Asheville, I kept waiting for it to feel real. For her to feel like my sister and not just a stranger who happened to share my DNA. But the moment we sat down for coffee, it was like—" She stopped, searching for words. "Like finding a part of myself I didn't know was missing." She felt the same way. I saw it in her emails. "Did she talk about me? After that weekend?" Ethan dried another plate before answering. "She called me from the hotel room. It was late. She just said goodnight to you. She was crying, but they were happy tears. She kept saying, 'I have a sister, Ethan. I actually have a sister.' Like she couldn't believe it was real." Victoria's face crumpled. She turned away, bracing herself against the counter. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quickly. "I shouldn't have—" "No!" Victoria's voice was fierce despite the tears. "I want to know. I want to know everything about those 18 months, every conversation she had about me, every plan she made, every—" She broke off, shoulders shaking. Ethan moved without thinking, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She stiffened for just a moment, then collapsed back against him, crying in earnest now. He held her while she shook, while the grief she'd been containing behind professional composure and careful boundaries finally broke free. "I was supposed to have more time," she choked out. "We were supposed to have Christmas together. She was going to bring Mia to meet me. We were going to—" She couldn't finish. "I know," Ethan said into her hair. "I know." They stood like that for a long time, the kitchen gradually darkening as the sun set. until Victoria's tears subsided into hitching breaths. When she finally pulled away, her face was blotchy and swollen. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping at her eyes. "I didn't mean to fall apart." "You're allowed to fall apart. You've been holding it together for months. So have you." "Yeah, well," Ethan handed her a dish towel. "Maybe we both need to fall apart sometimes." Victoria dried her face, then looked at him with something raw and honest in her expression. "I'm scared, Ethan." "Of what?" "That I'm going to lose this too, that the board will force me to choose between my job and my family, that people will keep looking at us and seeing something inappropriate instead of two people trying to honor someone they loved, that—" She stopped. "That you'll wake up one day and realize keeping me in your life hurts more than it helps." The vulnerability in her voice cut straight through Ethan's chest. "That's not going to happen," he said firmly. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." He stepped closer, making sure she could see his face. "Victoria, you're not a burden. You're not a complication. You're Mia's aunt. You're the only person in the world who understands what it was like to lose Lily. And you're—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "You're becoming my friend, someone I trust, someone I want in my life. Not because you look like her, but because you're you." Victoria's eyes were bright with fresh tears. "You mean that?" Every word. She hugged him then, a quick, fierce embrace that said everything words couldn't. When she pulled back, something had shifted in her expression. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. Hope. From the bathroom, they could hear Mia singing an off-key song about dragons, while Susan tried to convince her that yes, she really did need to wash her hair. "I should go," Victoria said, "before I cry again and traumatize your daughter." "You're not traumatizing anyone. But if you want to head out, I understand." They walked to the door together. Victoria paused with her hand on the knob. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "When Lily talked to you that night from Asheville, what else did she say?" Ethan thought back to that phone call, to Lily's voice trembling with joy and disbelief. She said she finally understood what family was supposed to feel like, and she said— He smiled despite the ache in his chest. "She said she couldn't wait to introduce you to me, that she thought we'd like each other." Victoria's breath caught. "She said that?" Word for word. Was she right? Ethan met her eyes. "Yeah, she was right." Victoria left a few minutes later after extracting a promise from Mia to bring her dragon drawings to their next Thursday dinner. Ethan stood in the doorway watching her car pull away, Susan coming to stand beside him. "She's good for you," his mother said quietly. "She's Lily's sister." "I know who she is." Susan's voice was gentle but firm. "And I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate. I'm just saying you're less alone when she's around, and that's important." Ethan couldn't argue with that. The following Monday, Ethan arrived at work to find an email from Richard Brennan requesting a meeting. His stomach dropped. He'd submitted all the documentation Victoria had asked for, had maintained professional boundaries in the office, had done everything the board requested. What more could they possibly want? The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Ethan spent the preceding hour distracted, running through worst-case scenarios. When he finally knocked on Brennan's office door, his palms were sweating. "Mr. Hayes, come in." Brennan gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to speak with you about the situation with Ms. Hale. If this is about the documentation is fine, complete and verifiable." Brennan steepled his fingers. "What concerns me is the ongoing perception issue." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What perception issue?" "Several members of our staff have expressed discomfort with the situation. They find it unusual, potentially inappropriate." "What exactly do they find inappropriate? That I'm related to my boss? That I'm grieving my wife? That I have the audacity to acknowledge my daughter's aunt?" Brennan's expression didn't change. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Hayes, but perception matters in this industry. Our clients expect a certain level of professionalism. And I've been nothing but professional. I'm not suggesting otherwise. However," Brennan leaned back in his chair, "I am suggesting that it might be beneficial for all parties if you considered a transfer to one of our other offices. We have an opening in Raleigh. Similar role, similar compensation. It would resolve the immediate concern about reporting structure. Ethan stared at him. You want me to leave Charlotte? Leave my home? Uproot my daughter? I'm offering you an option, not issuing a mandate. An option that conveniently removes the perception issue from your office. An option that allows you to continue your career without the complications of your current situation. Ethan stood abruptly. My current situation is called family, and I'm not abandoning it because some people are uncomfortable with grief. Brennan's expression hardened. I would caution against making rash decisions, Mr. Hayes. The architecture community is small. Burning bridges rarely serves anyone well. Is that a threat? It's advice. From someone who's been in this business longer than you've been alive. Ethan walked out before he could say something he'd regret. He made it to the stairwell before the anger gave way to something colder. Fear. Because Brennan was right about one thing. The architecture community was small. If Ethan pushed back too hard, if he made too much noise, it could follow him for years. But the alternative was abandoning Victoria, proving that the board's discomfort mattered more than family. He couldn't do that. He found Victoria in her office, staring at her computer screen with an expression that suggested she wasn't actually seeing it. She looked up when he knocked. Ethan, what's wrong? He told her about the meeting, about Brennan's suggestion, about the thinly veiled threat hidden beneath professional courtesy. Victoria's face went pale. They want you to transfer. They want the problem to go away. And apparently I'm the problem. No. Victoria stood, her voice sharp. I'm the problem. I'm the one who looks like your dead wife. I'm the one who took over this company. I'm the one who… Stop. Ethan crossed the office in 3 strides. You're not the problem. The board's discomfort is the problem. Their inability to see past optics to the actual truth is the problem. So what do we do? Ethan took a breath. I'm not transferring. I'm not leaving Charlotte. And I'm not pretending we're not family to make them comfortable. They'll make your life hell. Let them try. Victoria searched his face. You're sure about this? Completely. Then I'm calling an emergency board meeting. Today. Victoria. No. They've had their say. Now I'm having mine. She picked up her phone. And I'm done being polite about it. The meeting convened at 4 o'clock. Ethan wasn't invited, but he waited in the hallway again, pacing the same stretch of carpet he'd worn down during the last meeting. This time felt different. This time felt final. The door opened after 90 minutes. Board members filed out with expressions ranging from uncomfortable to openly hostile. Brennan was the last to leave, and he didn't acknowledge Ethan's presence. Victoria emerged looking exhausted, but resolved. What happened? Ethan asked. Walk with me. They took the elevator down to the parking garage, Victoria silent until they reached her car. Only then did she turn to face him. I told them the truth. All of it. About Lily. About the search. About finding her just in time to lose her. About you and Mia and what it means to finally have family after 20 years of being alone. Victoria's voice was steady. And I told them that if they couldn't accept that, if they couldn't see past their discomfort to the actual situation, then they needed to ask for my resignation. Ethan's heart stopped. What did they say? They didn't ask for my resignation. Victoria's expression was complicated, but they made it very clear that I'm on thin ice, that any hint of impropriety, any suggestion of favoritism, She stopped. Any misstep, and they'll have grounds to remove me. That's insane. That's corporate politics. Victoria leaned against her car. But I also made something clear to them. What? That I'm not going anywhere. That this is my company now, whether they like it or not. And that if they want to spend their time policing my personal relationships instead of focusing on actual business, they're welcome to try. But I'll fight them every step of the way. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. That's very Lily of you. Is it? She never backed down from a fight either, especially when it mattered. Victoria's expression softened. I wish I'd known that version of her, the fighter. You do know it. You're living it. They stood in the dim garage, the weight of the day settling over them. Finally, Victoria spoke again. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Is this worth it? The scrutiny, the gossip, the board breathing down our necks? Is it worth it to you? Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because Mia deserves to know her aunt. Because you deserve to have family. Because Lily would want this. He paused. And because I'm tired of grief being the only thing that defines us. I want... He struggled for the right words. I want to choose something. For once, instead of just surviving loss, I want to choose to build something. Victoria's eyes filled. Even if it's hard? Especially if it's hard. She nodded slowly. Okay, then we keep going. Together? Together. December arrived with the first real cold of winter, transforming Charlotte into a city of holiday lights and forced cheer. Ethan threw himself into work, determined to prove that the board's concerns were unfounded. His projects were flawless, his client relationships impeccable, his professionalism beyond reproach. But the whispers continued. He heard them in break room conversations that stopped when he entered, saw them in the careful way colleagues avoided mentioning Victoria in his presence, felt them in the sudden distance from people he'd worked alongside for years. Only a handful of coworkers remained actively friendly. Jason Chen, surprisingly, became an unexpected ally. He cornered Ethan in the break room one afternoon in mid-December. I was an idiot, Jason said without preamble. What I said about Victoria, about your wife, it was inappropriate, and I'm sorry. Ethan blinked. Okay. I talked to my sister about it. She's a therapist. She said grief doesn't follow rules, and family is whatever you choose to make it. And she said I should mind my own business and stop being a judgy asshole. Despite himself, Ethan laughed. Your sister sounds smart. She is. Smarter than me, anyway. Jason grabbed a coffee pod. For what it's worth, I think what you and Victoria are doing, building a family out of loss, it's pretty brave. It doesn't feel brave. It feels necessary. Same thing sometimes. The conversation stayed with Ethan through the rest of the week. Brave. He didn't feel brave. He felt exhausted, constantly defensive, worn down by the weight of other people's judgments. But maybe that was what bravery looked like in real life. Not grand gestures, but the daily choice to keep showing up despite the cost. Thursday evening, he met Victoria at their usual wine bar. She looked as tired as he felt. Bad week? He asked. Is there any other kind lately? She ordered a glass of red wine. The Piedmont project is behind schedule. Our lead contractor quit, and I spent 3 hours in a meeting defending budget decisions that shouldn't need defending. Brennan? Who else? Victoria took a long sip of her wine. He's pushing back on everything I propose. Not overtly enough to call him on it, but enough to slow everything down. Because he wants you to fail. Or at least to prove that a 25-year-old woman can't run a company. She set her glass down harder than necessary. Sometimes I wonder if they're right, if I'm in over my head. You're not. How do you know? Because I've seen you work. You're brilliant, Victoria. Everyone knows it, even if they won't admit it. She looked at him with something vulnerable in her eyes. Do you know what keeps me going on the really hard days? What? Knowing that Lily believed I could do this. She told me that weekend in Asheville, she said she was proud of me, that our father would have been proud, and her voice caught. I don't want to disappoint her, even though she's gone. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time he'd initiated physical contact beyond necessary greetings, and he felt her startle before her fingers curled around his. You could never disappoint her, he said quietly. She loved you, the real you, not some perfect version. How can you be sure? Because that's how she loved everyone, completely, without conditions. They sat like that for a moment, hands linked across the table, until Victoria gently pulled away. I got Mia's Christmas list, she said, clearly trying to lighten the mood. She sent it to me via Ethan's email. Very official. Ethan groaned. I told her one gift, one reasonable gift. She asked for 17 dragons and a real unicorn. The unicorn is new. Victoria laughed, and the sound eased something tight in Ethan's chest. They spent the rest of the evening talking about lighter things. Mia's elaborate plans for Christmas, Susan's upcoming visit, the terrible holiday decorations someone had put up in the office lobby. It felt normal, easy, Like friendship built on shared loss was transforming into something deeper. Not romance. Neither of them was ready for that, might never be ready for that given the circumstances. But genuine connection, the kind that sustained people through hard seasons. When they left the bar, the temperature had dropped below freezing. Victoria pulled her coat tighter. Ethan. Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on this. On us. Thank you for being worth not giving up on. She smiled, then got into her car and drove away. Ethan watched until her taillights disappeared, then headed home to where Mia was probably still awake, plotting new ways to expand her dragon collection. The next morning, everything changed. Ethan arrived at work to find Victoria's office door closed, voices raised inside. He recognized Brennan's tone, sharp, accusatory. Victoria's response was controlled but strained. The door flew open. Brennan stalked out, his face red with anger. He saw Ethan and stopped. "This is your fault," he said coldly. "What is?" "Ask your girlfriend." "She's not my..." But Brennan was already gone, disappearing into the elevator. Ethan turned to find Victoria standing in her doorway, her face ashen. "What happened?" "Someone filed a formal complaint with the board, anonymous, alleging that I've shown favoritism toward you, that I've approved raises and project assignments based on our personal relationship rather than merit." Ethan's blood ran cold. "That's not true." "I know it's not true. You know it's not true. But the board is required to investigate any formal complaint, which means," her voice shook, "which means audit. Full review of every decision I've made regarding your employment, every email, every meeting, everything. Let them look. They won't find anything because there's nothing to find." "You don't understand." Victoria stepped back into her office and Ethan followed. "Even if the investigation clears me, the damage is done. Every decision I make from now on will be questioned. Every interaction we have will be scrutinized. And if they find even the slightest appearance of impropriety, then what? Then I'm done. And possibly you too." Ethan sank into a chair. "Who would do this?" "I don't know. It could be anyone who's uncomfortable with the situation, anyone who wants me gone, anyone who..." She stopped, realization dawning. "Anyone who thinks they should have gotten my job instead of me." "You think it's someone internal?" "I think it's someone who knows enough about our situation to weaponize it." Victoria's hands were shaking. "And I think they're not going to stop until one of us leaves." The investigation began immediately. Auditors arrived on Monday, requesting files and records. Ethan was interviewed twice, once by the auditors, once by an HR representative brought in from the firm's Atlanta office. The questions were pointed, invasive, designed to catch inconsistencies. Had Ms. Hale ever given him preferential treatment? Had their personal relationship influenced any professional decisions? Had there been any inappropriate contact between them? Ethan answered truthfully, fighting to keep his anger in check. No. No. And absolutely not. But he could see how it looked from the outside. A young CEO who bore an uncanny resemblance to an employee's dead wife. Dinners together. Time spent at each other's homes. The optics were terrible, even if the reality was innocent. Victoria's interview lasted 4 hours. She emerged looking hollowed out, her professional armor visibly cracked. Ethan wanted to go to her, to offer comfort, but he knew any interaction would just feed the narrative being constructed around them, so he stayed away. For 2 weeks, they barely spoke except in group settings. No Thursday dinners, no casual check-ins, nothing that could be misconstrued as inappropriate. It was necessary, professional, the right thing to do. It was also agony. Mia noticed immediately. "Where's Victoria?" she asked on Thursday evening. "It's our dinner night." "She's busy with work, Bug." "But she's always busy with work. She still comes to dinner." "Not this week." "Why not?" "How did you explain corporate politics to a 4-year-old? How did you make her understand that sometimes doing the right thing looked wrong to people who didn't know the full story?" "Sometimes grown-ups have to be extra careful about rules," Ethan said finally. "Victoria and I are being careful right now." "But you didn't break any rules." "I know, but we still have to be careful." Mia considered this with the gravity of someone far older than 4. "I miss her." "Me too, Bug. Me too." The investigation concluded 3 days before Christmas. Ethan was in a client meeting when his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "My office. Now, please." He excused himself and took the stairs 2 at a time. Victoria was standing at her window when he arrived, her back to the door. "Victoria?" She turned, and he saw tears streaming down her face. "They cleared me. No evidence of favoritism, no inappropriate conduct, everything by the book." Relief flooded through him. "That's good. That's—" Brennan resigned from the board. Ethan froze. "What?" "He was the one who filed the complaint. They traced it back to him. Apparently he'd been trying to undermine me since I took over, and when that didn't work, he decided to use our situation against me." Victoria's voice was shaking with fury and relief. "But the investigation backfired. It showed that I've been more careful, more scrupulous about avoiding conflicts than any previous CEO. That I've recused myself from decisions about you multiple times. That I've gone above and beyond to maintain professional boundaries. So it's over? The investigation is over, but..." She stopped. "The board wants to meet with both of us tomorrow. Together. They want to discuss next steps." Ethan's relief evaporated. "Next steps? I don't know what that means, but I'm scared, Ethan." He crossed the office and pulled her into a hug. She collapsed against him, her professional composure finally shattering completely. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said into her hair, "we face it together. Promise?" "Promise." They stood like that until Victoria's tears subsided, until the fear gave way to exhausted determination. Then they pulled apart, both of them knowing that tomorrow would determine everything. But tonight, they had survived. And sometimes survival was enough. The night before the board meeting, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed watching the ceiling fan rotate, his mind spinning through every possible outcome. They could be separated, Victoria forced to fire him or transfer him to maintain appearances. They could both be pushed out, casualties of a situation that was unconventional but not wrong. Or the board could finally accept what Victoria had been saying all along, that family wasn't a conflict of interest, it was simply family. At 2 in the morning, his phone lit up with a text. "Are you awake?" It was Victoria. He typed back quickly. "Yes. Can't sleep." "Me neither. Can I call you?" He answered on the first ring, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't wake Mia in the next room. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Victoria's voice sounded small, uncertain. "I'm sorry for texting so late. I couldn't stop thinking about tomorrow." "Neither can I." "What if they force us to choose? The job or the relationship?" Ethan sat up, pressing his back against the headboard. "Then we choose the relationship, the family. But your career can be rebuilt somewhere else. But Mia only has one aunt, and I only have one person left in the world who knew Lily the way I did." He paused. "That's not replaceable, Victoria. A job is." He heard her breath catch over the line. "I don't deserve you," she said quietly. "Yes, you do. And you definitely deserved better than Brennan trying to destroy you. The board said he'd been building a case for months, looking for anything he could use against me. When he found out about Lily, about us, he thought he'd found the perfect ammunition. But he didn't count on you being completely transparent, or on you being willing to be investigated." Victoria's voice steadied slightly. "Ethan, the auditors told me something. During the review, they compared my decisions about you to the previous CEO's decisions about other employees. Do you know what they found?" "What?" "That I've been harder on you than anyone else. That I've passed you over for promotions you were qualified for, assigned you to smaller projects than your experience warranted, all because I was so terrified of appearing biased that I bent over backward in the other direction." Ethan absorbed this. He'd wondered sometimes why certain opportunities had gone to less experienced colleagues, why Victoria seemed to keep him at arm's length professionally, even as they grew closer personally. Now it made sense. "You were protecting both of us," he said. "I was being a coward." "No. You were surviving in an impossible situation." Ethan shifted the phone to his other ear. "But Victoria, tomorrow, whatever they say, I need you to stop punishing yourself for circumstances neither of us chose. Lily was your sister. I'm your family. That's not something to apologize for, even if it costs us everything? Even then. They talked until nearly 4 in the morning, their conversation drifting from fear to memories to the strange intimacy of shared insomnia. Victoria told him about the Christmas she'd spent alone in her father's empty house after he died, how she'd sat in his office reading his old project files because it was the only way she could feel close to him. Ethan told her about Lily's last Christmas, how she'd insisted on decorating every surface of their small apartment until it looked like a holiday store had exploded. "She sounds like she was wonderful at Christmas," Victoria said wistfully. "She was wonderful at everything that involved making other people happy." Ethan's throat tightened. "She would have bought me a 17 dragons if I'd let her." "I'm buying her 3. Is that too many?" "Probably, but do it anyway." Victoria laughed softly. "Lily would have liked that I'm spoiling her daughter, wouldn't she?" "She would have loved it." When they finally hung up, Ethan felt marginally more settled. Not hopeful exactly, but less alone. Whatever happened in the board meeting, they would face it together, just as he'd promised. The morning arrived cold and bright, the December sun doing nothing to warm the frost-covered city. Ethan dressed in his best suit, the one he'd worn to Lily's funeral and hadn't touched since. It felt appropriate somehow, armor for another kind of ending, or perhaps a beginning. He dropped Mia at daycare early, holding her a little tighter than usual. "You're squishing me, Daddy," she protested. "Sorry, Bug. Just love you a lot." "I love you too. Are you okay?" 4 years old and already reading his moods with unsettling accuracy. "I'm fine, just a big meeting at work today." "With Victoria?" "Yes." "Tell her Smoke misses her." Ethan smiled despite his nerves. "I will." The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock. Ethan arrived at 8:30 to find Victoria already in the 4th-floor hallway, pacing in front of the conference room doors. She looked exhausted, but impeccably put together, her dark hair pulled back, her navy suit perfectly tailored. When she saw him, relief flooded her face. "You're here." "Where else would I be?" They stood together in the empty hallway, the building still mostly quiet around them. Ethan wanted to say something profound, something that would ease the fear he could see in Victoria's eyes, but before he could find the words, the elevator chimed. Margaret Chen emerged, followed by David Okonkwo and 3 other board members Ethan recognized but didn't know well. They nodded politely as they passed, disappearing into the conference room. At exactly 9 o'clock, the door opened. Margaret stepped out. "Ms. Hale, Mr. Hayes, we're ready for you." The conference room was familiar yet suddenly foreign. Ethan had been in it dozens of times for project presentations and strategy meetings, but now it felt like a courtroom. The board sat along one side of the long table, 5 members in total now that Brennan was gone. Margaret at the center, David to her right, the others arranged with calculated symmetry. 2 empty chairs faced them on the opposite side. "Please, sit," Margaret said. Ethan and Victoria sat. Under the table, he felt Victoria's hand reach for his. He took it, their fingers intertwining where no one could see. Margaret folded her hands on the table in front of her. "I want to start by thanking you both for your patience during this investigation. I know it was invasive and stressful, and we appreciate your full cooperation." "Of course," Victoria said, her voice steady. "The investigation has concluded, and I want to be clear about the findings. There was no evidence of favoritism, no inappropriate conduct, and no violation of company policy. In fact," Margaret glanced at her notes, "the investigation revealed that Ms. Hale has maintained exceptionally high ethical standards, often to her own professional detriment." Victoria's hand tightened on Ethan's. "However," Margaret continued, and Ethan's stomach dropped at the word, "the situation remains complicated. The resemblance between Ms. Hale and Mr. Hayes' late wife is remarkable. Their family connection, while legitimate, is unusual, and the optics, regardless of the reality, continue to be a source of concern." "Concern for whom?" Victoria asked, an edge creeping into her voice. "For our clients, for our staff, for the professional reputation of this firm." David Okonkwo leaned forward. "We're not questioning your integrity, Victoria, but we have to consider how this situation is perceived externally." "With all due respect," Victoria said, her composure cracking slightly, "I don't control how people perceive reality. I can only control my actions. and my actions have been beyond reproach." "We agree," Margaret said quickly, "which is why we're not asking for anyone's resignation." Ethan felt Victoria exhale beside him. "However," Margaret continued, "we do need to establish clearer boundaries going forward, to protect both of you and the firm." "What kind of boundaries?" Ethan asked. Margaret looked at him directly. "We're proposing that Ms. Hale formally recuse herself from all employment decisions regarding your position. Promotions, raises, project assignments, all of it would go through me as CFO instead. It would create a layer of separation that protects everyone involved." It was reasonable, more than reasonable actually, but something in Ethan bristled at the implication that their relationship needed that kind of formal oversight. "And what about our personal relationship?" Victoria asked. "Are you going to police that too?" "No." Margaret's voice softened. "Your family. We understand that. We're not asking you to stop being family. We're just asking for professional boundaries within this building." "So, no more lunches together?" Ethan asked. "No conversations that aren't strictly work-related?" "We're not asking for anything that extreme," David said, "but perhaps more discretion, less visibility." Victoria pulled her hand from Ethan's. "You want us to hide?" "We want you to be mindful of appearances." "Appearances." Victoria's voice went cold. "My sister died 18 months ago. I found her just in time to lose her, and now I have the opportunity to know her daughter, to be part of the family she built, to honor her memory by being present in their lives. And you want me to hide that because it makes people uncomfortable?" The board members exchanged glances. "Victoria," Margaret said gently, "we understand how painful this is, but you have to see it from our perspective. You're the CEO. Your decisions affect hundreds of employees, millions of dollars in projects, the reputation of this firm. We can't have any hint of impropriety." "There is no impropriety!" Victoria's control shattered. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "My sister died. I'm grieving. He's grieving. We're helping each other survive something unbearable. That's not improper. That's human." Ethan stood beside her. "If you need me to transfer to make this easier, I will. But don't ask Victoria to choose between her career and her family. That's not fair." "We're not asking her to choose," Margaret said. "We're asking for reasonable accommodation to an unusual situation." "By making us invisible to each other," Victoria shot back. "By forcing us to pretend we're not connected. By turning something beautiful, the only good thing to come out of tragedy, into something shameful. That's not our intent, but it's the result." Victoria's voice broke. "Do you have any idea what it took for me to find Lily? 20 years of searching. 20 years of wondering if my sister was alive, if she remembered me, if she hated me for being the one Dad chose. And then I found her, and we had 18 months. 18 months of emails and phone calls and one perfect weekend. That's all I got." The room had gone silent. "And now," Victoria continued, tears streaming down her face, "I have her daughter, her husband, a chance to be the aunt she wanted me to be, a chance to be part of something instead of alone. And you're asking me to hide that? To be ashamed of it? To act like it's wrong instead of the most right thing in my life?" Margaret stood slowly. "Victoria, no." Victoria wiped at her eyes angrily. "I'm done defending myself. I'm done apologizing for circumstances I didn't choose. I'm done pretending that loving my niece and caring about her father is somehow inappropriate." She took a shaking breath. "If this board cannot accept that I am both Lily Carrington's sister and the CEO of this company, if you cannot see that those two things don't contradict each other, then perhaps I'm not the right person for this position after all." "Victoria, wait," David started, but Victoria was already moving toward the door. Ethan followed her, his heart pounding. They made it to the hallway before Margaret called out, "Ms. Hale, please, we're not finished." Victoria turned back, her face tear-stained but fierce. "Then finish." "But I won't apologize anymore, and I won't hide." Margaret looked at the other board members, some silent communication passing between them. Then she gestured back toward the conference room. "Please, sit down, both of you." Slowly, warily, they returned to their seats. The energy in the room had shifted, less formal, more human. Margaret sat down across from them. "You're right," she said quietly. "We've been so focused on optics and policy that we lost sight of the actual people involved. That's on us." Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting capitulation. "The truth is," Margaret continued, "this situation is unprecedented. We don't have a policy for it because it's never happened before. A CEO who's the identical twin of an employee's deceased spouse? There's no handbook for that." "So what are you saying?" Ethan asked. "I'm saying we've been treating this like a problem to be managed instead of a reality to be accommodated." Margaret looked between them. "You've both been through something traumatic. You're both grieving. And you've found comfort in each other. That's not inappropriate. That's human, just like you said." David nodded. "We owe you both an apology. For making this harder than it needed to be. For allowing Brennan's vendetta to poison the well. For not trusting that you'd handle this situation with the integrity you've demonstrated." Ethan felt Victoria's hand find his again under the table. "So what happens now?" Victoria asked, her voice small. Margaret smiled slightly. "Now we do what we should have done from the beginning. We trust you, both of you, to navigate this situation with the professionalism and ethics you've already shown. We'll implement the recusal policy for employment decisions, not because we doubt you, but because it protects you. Beyond that," she spread her hands, "you're adults, you're family. Act accordingly." "You mean," Victoria's voice wavered, "we don't have to hide?" "You never should have had to in the first place." The relief on Victoria's face was overwhelming. She pressed her free hand to her mouth, trying to contain the emotion. "There is one thing we'd like to suggest," David said. "Not a requirement, just a suggestion." "What?" Ethan asked. "Consider working with a grief counselor, together or separately. This situation, losing Lily, finding each other, navigating the resemblance, it's a lot to process. Having professional support might help." It was a good suggestion, one that Ethan should have thought of himself. "I'll consider it," Victoria said. "So will I," Ethan added. Margaret stood, and the other board members followed suit. "Then I think we're done here. Ms. Hale, Mr. Hayes, thank you for your honesty and for your patience with our process." They shook hands formally, but Margaret pulled Victoria into a brief hug before they left. "Your sister would be proud of you," she said quietly, "for fighting for your family." Victoria's eyes filled again, but she nodded. Out in the hallway, once the conference room door closed behind them, Victoria turned to Ethan. They stood there for a long moment, neither quite able to believe what had just happened. "Is it really over?" Victoria asked. "I think so. We can just be family without hiding?" "Apparently," Victoria laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "I can't believe that worked. I can't believe I yelled at the board and they actually listened." "You didn't yell. You were honest. I cried in front of them." "You were human." Ethan smiled. "Turns out that's allowed." Victoria hugged him then, right there in the hallway where anyone could see, no longer caring about optics or perception. Ethan held her while she shook with relief and residual fear and the weight of months of tension finally releasing. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder, "for standing with me, for not letting me face that alone." "Always," Ethan said. "That's what family does." When they finally pulled apart, Victoria's makeup was smudged and her composure was in shambles, but she looked lighter somehow, freer. "I need to fix my face," she said, gesturing at her tear-stained cheeks. "You need to take the day off," Ethan countered. "Go home, sleep, process this. I have meetings. Cancel them. You just survived a professional inquisition and an emotional breakdown. You've earned a day." Victoria considered this. "What about you?" "I'm picking Mia up early. We're going Christmas shopping. Want to come?" The invitation hung between them. Simple, ordinary, the kind of thing families did together. "Really?" Victoria asked. "Really, unless you have better things to do than watch a 4-year-old agonize over dragon selection." "I can't think of anything I'd rather do." 2 hours later, Ethan, Victoria, and Mia were wandering through a toy store in South Park, Mia leading them on an elaborate tour of every dragon-related item in stock. She'd already selected 4, well over the agreed-upon limit, and showed no signs of slowing down. "This one breathes actual fire," Mia explained, holding up a particularly garish purple dragon. Well, not actual fire, but lights. That's very cool, Victoria said seriously. But didn't we say 3 dragons? We said 3, but then I found this one. So now it's 4. Ethan caught Victoria's eye. She was trying not to laugh. Mia, he said, 4 is too many. But Daddy, they're a family. I can't separate a family. Victoria lost the battle against laughter. Ethan groaned. You're not helping, he told Victoria. Sorry, but she makes a compelling argument. Mia latched onto this immediately. See? Victoria understands about families. In the end, they bought all 4 dragons plus a castle that Mia insisted was essential for proper dragon housing. Ethan paid while Victoria helped Mia arrange the dragons in their shopping bag according to some complex hierarchy only she understood. They grabbed lunch at a burger place Lily used to love, Mia chattering nonstop about Dragon Society, while Ethan and Victoria exchanged amused glances across the table. It felt normal, easy, like they'd been doing this for years instead of months, like family. After lunch, they drove to the park. Mia ran ahead to the playground while Ethan and Victoria sat on a bench watching her climb the jungle gym with fearless determination. She's so much like Lily, Victoria said softly. That confidence, that joy. She has Lily's laugh, Ethan agreed. Sometimes I hear it and I forget for a second that… He stopped. That she's gone. Yeah. They watched Mia conquer the monkey bars, her triumphant shout carrying across the playground. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Of course. Do you think… She hesitated. Do you think there will ever be a time when you can look at me and not see her? Even a little? Ethan thought about it carefully. I don't know. The resemblance is always going to be there. That's just biology. But I don't see you the same way I did 8 months ago. How do you see me now? As Victoria. Lily's sister, yes. But also your own person. Someone who's brilliant and fierce and scared and brave. Someone who fights for what matters. Someone who… He paused. Someone who's becoming one of the most important people in my life. Victoria's eyes filled. Really? Really? Ethan turned to face her fully. You're not a ghost, Victoria. You're not a replacement. You're just you. And that's enough. More than enough. Victoria wiped at her eyes. I wish Lily could know this. That we found each other. That we're okay. I think she does know, Ethan said. I think she's probably pretty smug about it, actually. She always did love being right. Victoria laughed through her tears. Was she bossy? Extremely. She had this way of making suggestions that were actually commands. I do that too. I've noticed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Mia play. The December afternoon was cold but clear, the sun slanting through bare trees and painting everything gold. Ethan? Victoria said eventually. Yeah? I'm glad the board meeting went the way it did. But even if it hadn't, even if they'd asked me to choose, I would have chosen you and Mia. I need you to know that. Ethan's chest tightened. I know. Do you? Because I spent so many years being alone, being self-sufficient, never needing anyone. And I don't want you to think that I'd ever choose a job over family, over you. Victoria, I mean it. You and Mia, you're what I have left of her. You're also what I have for myself, my family, my people. She looked at him. I'm not going anywhere. Neither am I, Ethan said firmly. Mia ran over then, breathless and pink-cheeked from exertion. Can we go get hot chocolate? It's 3 p.m, Ethan said. You'll spoil your dinner. Please? Victoria hasn't had the good hot chocolate yet, the kind with the whipped cream mountain. Victoria looked at Ethan. Hot chocolate with whipped cream mountain sounds very important. You're a terrible influence, Ethan said, but he was smiling. Thank you, Victoria said cheerfully. They ended up at the same cafe where Ethan had brought Lily on their first real winter together, the one that served hot chocolate so rich it was basically melted candy bars. Mia got whipped cream on her nose within 30 seconds. Victoria took a picture. For the record, she said, showing Ethan the photo. Evidence of proper ant behavior. Enabling sugar highs, building memories. Ethan looked at the photo, Mia grinning with whipped cream everywhere, Victoria laughing beside her, both of them lit by the warm glow of the cafe lights. It was a good memory, the kind Lily would have loved, the kind they were learning to make without her. When they finally dropped Victoria at her car back at the toy store parking lot, Mia insisted on a prolonged goodbye that involved showing each dragon to Victoria individually and making her promise to come for Christmas. "I'll be there," Victoria promised, "with more presents than your daddy will approve of." "I heard that," Ethan called from the driver's seat. Victoria grinned. "You were meant to." She bent down to Mia's level. "Thank you for today, for letting me be part of your dragon shopping adventure." "Your family," Mia said simply. "Family does adventures together." Victoria's eyes went bright. She pulled Mia into a hug, holding on perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "I love you, Mia," she said quietly. "I love you too, Aunt Victoria." It was the first time Mia had used the title without prompting. Ethan saw the impact it had on Victoria, the way her face crumpled briefly before she pulled herself together. "Okay," she said, her voice thick. "You two better go before I cry again." "Again?" Mia asked. "I'll explain in the car," Ethan said quickly. They drove home through the early December darkness, Mia falling asleep in her car seat before they'd gone 3 blocks, her new dragons clutched in her arms. Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror and felt something settle in his chest. They were going to be okay, all 3 of them. That night, after Mia was in bed, Ethan sat on the couch with a beer he didn't drink and thought about the day. About the board meeting that could have ended his career but instead ended with validation. About Victoria standing up to powerful people because family mattered more than comfort. About Mia calling her Aunt Victoria like it was the most natural thing in the world. His phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for today, for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I don't think you understand what you've given me. A family, a purpose, a reason to keep going. You and Mia, you're everything I didn't know I needed." Ethan stared at the message for a long time before responding. "You've given us the same thing. Lily would be happy we found each other. I really believe that." The response came quickly. "So do I." "Good night, Ethan. Good night, Victoria." He set the phone down and closed his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Tomorrow, he'd go back to work. Tomorrow he'd navigate the careful balance of being Victoria's employee and her family. Tomorrow he'd continue the slow process of rebuilding a life that grief had shattered. But tonight, he let himself feel something he hadn't felt in 18 months. Gratitude. For second chances. For unexpected connections. For the woman who'd searched 20 years for her sister and found a family instead. For Victoria. Christmas arrived with unexpected warmth, the kind of mild southern winter that let children play outside without heavy coats, and turned the holiday into something gentler than the Courier and Ives postcards promised. Ethan woke early on Christmas morning to find Mia already awake, sitting cross-legged in front of the tree with an expression of barely contained anticipation. "Can I wake up Victoria?" she whispered when she saw him. Victoria had stayed over the night before, sleeping on the pull-out couch after their late-night session of cookie decorating had turned into wine and conversation that stretched past midnight. It had felt natural, inevitable even, for her to stay rather than drive home exhausted. "Let her sleep a little longer, Bug," Ethan said. "Come help me make coffee." But Mia's excitement had already woken Victoria. She emerged from the living room with her hair disheveled, wearing the spare pajamas Ethan had loaned her, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "Merry Christmas," she said, her voice rough with sleep. "Merry Christmas. Can we open presents now?" Mia bounced on her toes. "After breakfast," Ethan said firmly. That's the rule. They made pancakes together. The 3 of them navigating the small kitchen with the easy choreography of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Victoria flipped while Ethan poured, Mia setting the table with intense concentration. The radio played carols softly in the background, and for a moment Ethan could almost forget that this wasn't how it had always been. Almost. The absence of Lily still lived in the space between them, not painful exactly, but present. Like a 4th person at the table whose chair remained empty, but whose presence was honored rather than ignored. After breakfast, they finally moved to the presents. Mia tore through hers with gleeful abandon while Ethan and Victoria watched from the couch, their coffee cups warming their hands. Victoria had indeed bought more than Ethan approved of. Not just the promised dragons, but books and art supplies and a child-sized easel because Mia had mentioned wanting to paint like Mommy used to. "You're spoiling her," Ethan said without heat. "That's my job as the aunt," Victoria replied. "You get to be the responsible one. I get to be fun." When Mia reached the last present under the tree, she paused. It was a small box wrapped in silver paper, tagged with Victoria's name in Ethan's handwriting. "That one's for Victoria, Bug," Ethan said. Mia handed it over solemnly. Victoria looked at Ethan with surprise. "You didn't have to. Just open it." Inside was a silver locket on a delicate chain. Victoria opened it with trembling fingers to find two photographs, one of Lily from that perfect weekend in Asheville, and one of Mia from Thanksgiving, both women wearing almost identical smiles. Victoria's eyes filled immediately. "Ethan, I thought you should have them with you," he said quietly. "The sister you found and the niece you're getting to know. Both parts of the family Lily wanted you to have." Victoria couldn't speak. She just clutched the locket to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Mia climbed onto the couch beside her, wrapping small arms around Victoria's waist. "Don't cry, Aunt Victoria. It's a happy present." "I know, sweetheart." Victoria's voice was thick. "These are happy tears." "That's what Daddy always says, too." Victoria laughed through her tears, meeting Ethan's eyes over Mia's head. The gratitude in her expression said everything words couldn't. Later, while Mia was occupied with her new easel, Victoria cornered Ethan in the kitchen. "I have something for you, too," she said, "but I wasn't sure if I should give it to you. It might be too much." "What is it?" She pulled a manila envelope from her bag. "After Lily died, I collected everything I could find about her. Obituaries, the funeral program, anything public that mentioned her name. But I also—" She hesitated. "I also kept all our emails. Every single one from the day we reconnected until the last message she sent me. I had them printed and bound. I thought maybe—" Her voice wavered. "Maybe Mia should have them someday. So she can know her mother searched for her sister, so she can see how much Lily loved her family." Ethan took the envelope with unsteady hands. Inside was a leather-bound book, beautifully made. The emails arranged chronologically with dates and subject lines preserved. He opened it randomly and found himself reading Lily's words from 2 years earlier. "Victoria, I've been thinking about what you said, about being afraid you'd be a terrible mother because of how you grew up. I felt the same way. Still do sometimes. But then I look at Mia and I think maybe we don't have to repeat our parents' mistakes. Maybe we can choose to be different." Ethan's throat closed. He flipped through more pages, seeing Lily's voice preserved in digital amber, her fears, her joys, her growing love for the sister she'd found. "This is—" He couldn't find adequate words. "Victoria, this is incredible. I wanted Mia to know that her mother was brave, that she fought for connection even when she was scared, that she believed in second chances." Victoria's eyes were bright. "The same things I want her to know about you." Ethan set the book down carefully and pulled Victoria into a hug. She came willingly, her arms wrapping around him with the kind of trust that had been built slowly over months of shared grief and hard-won understanding. "Thank you," he said into her hair, "for preserving this, for giving us this piece of her. Thank you for letting me be part of this, part of your family." They stood like that until Mia called for them to come see her first painting, a purple dragon that looked more like a blob, but which she insisted was a perfect representation of Smoke's cousin. The rest of the day unfolded with the lazy contentment of holidays done right. They watched Mia's favorite movies, built an elaborate dragon fortress out of couch cushions, and made a dinner that was supposed to be ham but turned into grilled cheese when they realized no one had actually bought a ham. "Lily would have found this hilarious," Victoria said, biting into her sandwich. "She would have declared it a new tradition," Ethan agreed. "Christmas grilled cheese, very fancy. With the crust cut off because we're civilized," Victoria added solemnly. Mia giggled. "You guys are silly. We learn from the best," Ethan said, and the weight of that truth settled warm in his chest. That evening, after Mia had finally crashed from sugar and excitement, Ethan and Victoria sat on the small balcony despite the chill in the air. Victoria wore the locket now, her fingers occasionally touching it like she needed to confirm it was real. Can I ask you something? Ethan said. Always. What happens now? After all of this, the investigation, the board meeting, Christmas, what comes next? Victoria considered the question carefully. I don't know. Keep living, I guess. Keep figuring out how to be a CEO and an aunt and a person who's still learning how to have family. She looked at him. What do you want to happen? Ethan had been asking himself the same question for weeks. I want Mia to grow up knowing her aunt. I want Thursday dinners to keep happening. I want to stop flinching every time someone asks me about you. He paused. And I want to figure out who I am now. Not who I was when Lily was alive, but who I'm becoming without her. That's terrifying, Victoria said quietly. Yeah, but also kind of beautiful. Yeah. They sat in silence for a while, watching the lights of Charlotte twinkle in the distance. Then Victoria spoke again. I started seeing a therapist, like the board suggested. Not because they told me to, but because I needed to. How's it going? Hard. She keeps asking me questions I don't want to answer, like whether I feel guilty for having a family now when Lily doesn't, or whether I'm afraid I'm replacing her in Mia's life. Victoria's voice caught. Or whether I'll ever be able to look in the mirror without seeing her face instead of mine. Ethan reached over and took her hand. What do you tell her? That yes, I feel guilty. That yes, I'm afraid. That yes, sometimes I look in the mirror and hate that I got to live when she didn't. Victoria's fingers tightened on his. But I also tell her that Lily wouldn't want me to disappear just because she's gone. That she'd want me to love Mia, to help you, to build a life instead of just surviving. And that maybe, her voice broke, maybe honoring her means living fully instead of hiding from everything that reminds me of what we lost. She'd be proud of you, Ethan said, for fighting so hard to stay. I'm proud of you too, for letting me. Inside they could hear Mia talking in her sleep, a stream of nonsense about dragons and Christmas and Aunt Victoria. Victoria smiled at the sound. I never thought I'd have this, she said softly. A place where I belonged. People who wanted me around not because of what I could do for them, but just because I existed. You belong here, Ethan said firmly. With us. Always. Victoria turned to look at him fully, and in the dim light from the apartment, Ethan saw not Lily's ghost, but Victoria herself. Wounded and healing, fierce and fragile, entirely her own person. I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to really hear it. Okay? I'm not going to fall in love with you. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. They felt like relief. I know, Ethan said, not because there's anything wrong with you, but because you loved my sister, because I look like her, because it would be too complicated, too confusing, too... I know, Ethan repeated gently, and I'm not going to fall in love with you either. Victoria's eyes searched his face. You're sure? I'm sure. Ethan squeezed her hand. What we have, what we're building, it's not about romance. It's about family, about choosing to show up for each other, about creating something new from the pieces of what we lost. I just needed to say it out loud, to make sure we're on the same page. We are, Ethan smiled. You're Mia's aunt. You're my friend. You're the person who knew Lily in a way no one else did, and who helps keep her memory alive. That's enough. More than enough. Victoria exhaled shakily. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for being honest. They went back inside to find Mia had kicked off all her covers and was sprawled sideways across her bed, smoke clutched in one hand and her new dragon family arranged around her like guards. Victoria helped Ethan tuck her back in, both of them moving with the quiet coordination of people who shared the same purpose. At the door to Mia's room, Victoria paused. Ethan? Yeah. I know I'm not Lily. I know I never will be. But I promise I'll love this little girl with everything I have. I'll show up for her. I'll be the Aunt Lily wanted me to be. I know you will. And I'll show up for you too. Not as a replacement for what you lost, but as family, Ethan finished. Just family. Victoria nodded, satisfied. The new year arrived with the kind of quiet resolve that came after surviving something hard. The gossip at the office finally died down, helped by Victoria's unflinching competence and Ethan's consistent professionalism. They fell into new rhythms. Thursday dinners resumed but became more casual, sometimes including Mia's friends or Ethan's mother. Weekend visits where Victoria would take Mia to museums or parks, while Ethan caught up on work. Monthly video calls with Susan, who'd claimed Victoria as her own, and regularly sent care packages addressed to my daughter, Victoria. In March, on what would have been Lily's 30th birthday, the three of them visited her grave together for the first time. Mia brought a drawing, Ethan brought flowers, and Victoria brought a letter she'd written but wouldn't read aloud. "I'll just leave it with her," she said quietly, tucking the folded paper under the flowers. They stood together in the spring sunshine, three people bound by loss but no longer defined by it. Ethan felt Mia slip her hand into his on one side, Victoria's shoulder press against his on the other, and thought about how far they'd come from that first painful encounter in Victoria's office. "I miss her," Mia said simply. "Me too, Bug," Ethan replied. "Me three," Victoria added. "But I'm glad we have each other," Mia continued with the wisdom that sometimes emerged from children. "Mommy would like that we're together." "Yes," Victoria said, her voice thick. "She would." They left flowers and drawings and private words, then went out for breakfast at Lily's favorite diner where the waitresses remembered her and cooed over how much Mia looked like her mother. It hurt, but it was the kind of hurt that came with remembering rather than forgetting, the kind that honored instead of destroyed. By summer, Victoria had fully settled into her role as aunt. She attended Mia's preschool graduation, cheering louder than anyone when Mia received her certificate. She taught Mia to bake the cookies Lily used to make, the two of them covered in flour and giggling over the kitchen counter while Ethan documented it all on his phone. She showed up for ordinary moments, helping with homework, attending doctor's appointments when Ethan had client meetings, reading bedtime stories about dragons and voices that made Mia shriek with laughter. She became essential, not as Lily's replacement, but as herself. One evening in late August, as they cleaned up after dinner, Mia made an announcement. "I'm going to tell my kindergarten teacher I have an aunt." Ethan and Victoria exchanged glances. "Are you sure, Bug?" Ethan asked carefully. They'd never hidden Victoria's existence, but they'd let Mia control how and when to share. "I'm sure, because Samantha has an aunt, and Owen has two aunts, and I have Aunt Victoria, and she's the best one." Victoria's eyes filled. "I don't know about the best." "The best," Mia insisted, "because you look like Mommy, but you're you, and that makes you special." Out of the mouths of children. Later, after Mia was in bed, Victoria lingered at the door. "She's really okay, isn't she?" Victoria said. "With all of this. With me. She's more than okay. She's thriving. Sometimes I'm terrified I'll mess it up, that I'll say the wrong thing about Lily, or push too hard, or not be enough. Victoria." Ethan stopped her spiraling with gentle firmness. "You're doing everything right. You're showing up. You're loving her. That's what matters. I just want to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me. The trust Lily placed in me." "You already are." Victoria hugged him goodnight, a gesture that had become routine, comfortable, the way family embraced without overthinking it. At the door, she turned back. "You know what the therapist said to me last week?" "What?" "She said that maybe the greatest gift we can give Lily is to live the life she wanted for us, to let her death matter by making sure her daughter knows love, her husband finds peace, and her sister finds belonging." Victoria's voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I think she's right. So do I." "Then that's what we'll do. We'll live. Fully. The way she would have wanted. Together," Ethan added. "Together," Victoria agreed. She left, and Ethan stood in the doorway watching her car pull away, the summer night warm around him. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, hollow with grief, unable to even look at Victoria without pain, convinced he'd never feel whole again. He thought about who he was now, a father raising a daughter who knew she was loved by both her living family and the memory of her mother, a man learning to carry loss without being crushed by it, a friend to the woman who'd searched 20 years for her sister and found a family instead. He wasn't the same person who'd lost Lily. That man was gone, carved away by grief and rebuilt by the choice to keep living. But maybe that was okay. Maybe transformation was just another word for survival. Inside, Mia called out for water. Ethan went to her, fulfilling the ordinary requirements of parenthood that Lily would have shared if she'd lived. But she hadn't lived, and he had, and Victoria had, and Mia had, and together they were writing a different story than the one that had been planned. It wasn't the story any of them would have chosen, but it was theirs. And as Ethan tucked his daughter back in, kissing her forehead and whispering the same words Lily used to say, "Sleep tight, don't let the dragons bite," he felt something unexpected. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but contentment, acceptance. The sense that life, in its messy and unexpected way, had given them exactly what they needed, even if it wasn't what they'd wanted. Victoria, who looked like Lily, but was entirely herself. A family built from loss but sustained by choice. A future that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. That night, Ethan pulled out the book of emails Victoria had given him. He read through them slowly, hearing Lily's voice in every word, seeing the sister she'd found, and the family she'd wanted to build. On the last page, dated 2 days before her death, Lily had written something that made Ethan's breath catch. "Victoria, I've been thinking about the future, about all the things we're going to do together, holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays. I want Mia to know you. I want Ethan to know you. I want you to be part of our lives in real, tangible ways. I know it's fast, but when you spend 20 years looking for someone, you don't want to waste time once you've found them. So here's my promise to you. I'm going to make sure you have the family you've been searching for, no matter what it takes." Ethan closed the book carefully, his vision blurred. Lily had kept her promise, just not in the way anyone expected. She'd made sure Victoria had family. She'd made sure they found each other, and in doing so, she'd given them all away to survive her absence. Months turned into years, and the strange family they'd built became simply family. Victoria's role in Mia's life expanded naturally. School conferences and soccer games, sleepovers at Victoria's now homey apartment, shared custody of holidays that felt less like obligation and more like celebration. Ethan and Victoria became the kind of friends who could sit in comfortable silence or talk for hours, who knew each other's coffee orders and terrible moods, who showed up without being asked because they'd learned that's what family did. The resemblance between Victoria and Lily never disappeared. How could it? But it transformed into something different, not a source of pain, but a connection to what they'd all loved. Sometimes Mia would trace Victoria's features and say matter-of-factly, "You look just like Mommy here." And Victoria would say, "I know, sweetheart, we were twins." And that would be enough. On the second anniversary of Lily's death, they returned to her grave. Mia was 6 now, old enough to understand death in a way she hadn't before, but still young enough to believe in the possibility of heaven and angels and mothers who watched over their daughters. "Do you think she's proud of us?" Mia asked, looking at the headstone. Ethan and Victoria exchanged glances. "I think," Victoria said carefully, "that she's grateful we found each other, that we're taking care of the people she loved. And that we're happy sometimes," Ethan added, "even though we miss her." "I'm happy lots of times," Mia said. "Is that okay?" "That's more than okay," Ethan assured her. "That's exactly what Mommy would want." They left flowers, lilies, always lilies, and stood together in the autumn sunshine. A family shaped by loss but defined by love. 3 people who'd learned that grief didn't have to be the end of the story, that sometimes it was just the beginning of a different one. As they walked back to the car, Mia between them holding both their hands, Ethan thought about how far they'd come. From that first terrible moment when he couldn't even look at Victoria without drowning in pain, to this, walking through a cemetery with his daughter and her aunt, talking about the woman they'd all loved, building a life that honored her by continuing despite her absence. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was a good life, a life Lily would have wanted for them. And in the end, perhaps that was the greatest tribute they could give her. Not perfect grief or endless mourning, but the courage to keep living, to keep loving, to keep showing up for each other day after ordinary day. Victoria caught his eye over Mia's head and smiled. Not Lily's smile, he realized, but her own. He smiled back, grateful for the woman who'd searched 20 years for her sister and stayed to love the family that sister left behind. The grief would always be there, Some losses were too profound to ever fully heal. But so would this, the three of them, bound together by choice and circumstance, writing a story about what comes after tragedy, about how broken people could piece each other back together, about how love, in all its complicated forms, could survive even death, and about how sometimes the greatest gift we can give the people we've lost is to live fully in the spaces they left behind, together.